Chapter 1389. Li Zongbao pulled Xianxia's sleeves. Under the protection of the jade bottle's deep blue brilliance, the two of them were about to safely withdraw from the space. Dozens of feet above them, on the head of the blood mist figure in the blood-colored pattern, a blood-red light flashed. The whole pattern suddenly lit up. With a swoosh sound, the whole space was filled with blood-red brilliance. Then, a blood-red light flashed under Li Zongbao and Xianxia's feet. Before Li Zongbao and Xianxia could react, their figures suddenly disappeared. They were actually teleported away. Compared to Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and the others, Qing Fengmin and the rest of the loose cultivators were much more relaxed. These loose cultivators formed teams of dozens and cooperated with each other. Although the cave was quiet, everyone's hurried footsteps and the occasional sound filled their hearts with a sense of security. Therefore, everyone was grateful to Tianqi and Qing Fengmin from the bottom of their hearts. Moreover, Qing Fengmin's jade beasts were obviously better than Xianxia's. Xianxia's group walked for a long time before they reached the end of the mountain path and entered the space. Qing Fengmin's group, on the other hand, used less than the time it took to eat a meal to reach the space directly. The space led by Tianqi's jade beasts was quite large. Dozens or even hundreds of cultivators didn't seem to feel crowded when they entered. Fellow Taoist Qing. Is this the 1,000-feet-old man's cave? Ma Qingqing followed Qing Fengmin into the space and looked at the empty space with some doubts. Qing Fengmin smiled and shook his head slightly. According to Ai's observation, this place. I'm afraid it's not the 1,000-feet-old man's cave. If it's so easy to enter, then wouldn't the 1,000-feet-old man's mantle have been taken away 1,000 years ago? Oh, so it's like that. Ma Qingqing frowned. But I feel a little uneasy after entering this place. Well, fellow Taoist Ma, please wait a moment. I will place the moonstone on the stone wall. Qing Fengmin said calmly. Just as Qing Fengmin placed the moonstone on the stone wall, the entire space was illuminated. Dozens of rogue cultivators also entered this space. Fellow Taoist Qing, look up. Soon, someone noticed the blood-red pattern on top of the space. This pattern was extremely large, several times larger than the one Xiaohua had seen. Seeing this, Qing Fengmin's face was full of shock. He hurriedly shouted, "What is this? Has any fellow Taoist seen him before?" Just as everyone was about to discuss, the jade beast in Qing Fengmin's hand also turned into a light green brilliance and flew into the eyes of the blood-red pattern. It was different from what Jianghu and the others had encountered. When the blood-red mist surged, the blood-red light in the two eyes flashed, and the entire space flashed. The dozens of people in the cave were all teleported away. Once the dozens of people were sent away, the cave quickly returned to normal. The blood mist gradually solidified, and the jade beast in the eye suddenly disappeared as the blood mist solidified. Everyone who entered the 1,000-feet peak was either sent away or swallowed by the blood mist, disappearing without a trace. In the entire rugged and crisscrossed cave, only Xiaohua was left. Xiaohua walked on the mountain path and became more and more anxious. He followed the path he came from and kept walking back, but after walking for a while, he discovered that this mountain path seemed to be different from the one he had just walked on. But he clearly walked directly back and there were no forks in the road. How could it be that it was blocked? At this time, he no longer hoped to find the 1,000-feet-old man's legacy, medicinal pills, or cultivation techniques. He only hoped to find a way out as soon as possible and quickly get out of this strange 1,000-feet peak. At this time, he gradually understood why the 1,000-feet-old man's legacy had not been inherited by anyone in the past 1,000 years. Hiss! A sound came from not far behind Xiaohua. Who is it? Xiaohua shouted as he turned his head. Unfortunately, when he turned his head back, the sound had already disappeared. Whoosh! A gust of wind sounded, as if something had flown over Xiaohua's head. Xiaohua did not hesitate, and threw the fireball talisman in his hand upwards. Rumble! A loud sound rang out, and the entire cave shook. But even though it shook, not a single piece of soil was shaken off. At this time, like a gust of wind, a blood mist as tall as a person gushed out from who knows where. It gradually gathered and took shape in the air before Xiaohua's eyes. Looking at its shape, it looked exactly like the blood-colored pattern. This is bad. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. Without thinking, he threw out all the fireball talismans in his hand. They hit the surging blood mist and he flew away without looking back. Rumble! A burst of sound and light. The blood mist seemed to be unaffected by the exploding fireballs and gradually took the shape of a blood-colored human. Ga. The blood shadow actually made a sound, as if it was laughing nastily. Immediately, it chased after Xiaohua with extreme speed. The blood shadow's speed was extremely fast. Even though Xiaohua's flying speed was comparable to the 12th layer of the Qi refining realm, it was still inferior to the blood shadow by a lot. However, in the blink of an eye, the blood shadow was already behind Xiaohua. Xiaohua became vigilant and used his hand to brush the air. Immediately, a dozen different yellow talismans appeared in his hand. He urged his transcendence energy and shot them out. Fireball talismans, icicle talismans, weak water talismans, confinement talismans, and so on. All the yellow talismans were like clay oxen entering the sea. They simply could not raise the slightest wave and were unable to cause any damage to the blood shadow. Seeing that the blood shadow was about to pounce on him, a fork in the road appeared in front of Xiaohua. Without thinking, he turned his body and flew in another direction. The blood shadow was caught off guard and actually rushed far away. Immediately, it made a loud ga sound, as if it was angry. When the blood shadow turned around the fork, Xiaohua had already flown far away. In this way, Xiaohua flew in front and the blood shadow chased from behind. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiaohua's vision suddenly turned black. He actually flew into a huge space. This space was about the same size as the space that Qing Fengmin and the others entered. Xiaohua saw that there was no way out and his face unconsciously became filled with shock. He stopped in horror. The blood shadow behind him also followed, making a ga sound and pouncing on him. Xiaohua clenched his teeth and his figure suddenly jumped up, wanting to fly over the blood shadow. Who would have thought that just as Xiaohua surpassed the blood shadow and was secretly delighted, from the blood-colored pattern above his head, a cloud of blood mist also gushed out. It was even faster than the blood shadow before and covered Xiaohua's body. The blood mist stuck to Xiaohua's body. Weak water talismans, iron cloak talismans, they were all useless. The blood mist quickly seeped into Xiaohua's body and the transcendence energy in Xiaohua's meridians leaked out. Xiaohua's figure suddenly fell from the sky. The blood shadow that Xiaohua dodged also turned around at this time. It made a ga sound and waved its hand. The blood mist flew out from Xiaohua's body and condensed into a blood-colored bead that flew into the blood shadow's hand. When the blood shadow swallowed the blood bead, Xiaohua struggled to stand up from the ground. His eyes were filled with horror as he looked at the blood shadow not far away in the moonlight. Ga. The blood shadow didn't seem to give Xiaohua any time. It flew up and pounced on Xiaohua in the blink of an eye, as if it wanted to penetrate his body. And just as the blood shadow pounced on him, Xiaohua's mind turned black and he lost consciousness. However, at this moment, a shocking scene appeared. The blood shadow pounced on Xiaohua's body and seemed to be trying its best to penetrate his body. But the blood shadow was unable to penetrate his body. In fact, the head of the blood shadow only spun around outside Xiaohua's Naiwan palace before it broke free again. After a long time, the blood shadow saw that there was no result. It could only fly up from Xiaohua's body and condense above the unconscious Xiaohua. A jerky and hoarse voice came from the blood shadow. Demon race technique? No wonder you can't swallow blood essence. But just now, Qi refining level 3 Naiwan palace was actually sealed? This person, what's going on? The blood shadow's voice was indeed obscure, but if the unconscious Xiaohua could hear it, he would definitely be able to distinguish that this voice was somewhat similar to the voice of a person he was extremely familiar with. But Xiaohua was already unconscious and couldn't hear it. Similarly, he couldn't answer the blood shadow's question. Soon after, the blood shadow jumped up and rushed into the blood-red pattern above the space. A burst of blood-red light flashed and Xiaohua was also transported away. Speaking of which, under the protection of the jade bottle's dark blue light, Li Zongbao and Wuxia thought that they were safe from the blood mist. But unexpectedly, the eyes in the blood-red pattern flashed and the two of them were transported away from the space. Along with the dazzling light of the teleportation, a burst of pressure pressed down on Li Zongbao and Wuxia. Teleportation formation? Li Zongbao was shocked. He knew that if it was a long-distance teleportation formation, without the protection of a teleportation talisman, he and Wuxia would definitely be subjected to the pressure of unknown teleportation and would be crushed into meat paste very quickly. Fortunately, the pressure of the teleportation formation increased and immediately disappeared. Li Zongbao felt that he was standing on solid ground. Without waiting for him to open his eyes, a burst of dizziness came from his mind. He clenched his teeth and activated the magic power in his hand. Ignoring the uncomfortable feeling on his body, he sent his magic power to the magic tool in his hand. He was afraid that someone would sneak attack him at this time. Fortunately, after the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, the dizziness disappeared, and he didn't see anyone attacking him. When he stabilized his mind and wanted to call Wuxia, who was also dizzy, Li Zongbao was shocked by what he saw in front of him. It was a huge space, surrounded by blood-red light. It was impossible to tell whether this space was within the 1,000-foot mountain or somewhere else. In the center of this blood-red space was a huge stone statue. It looked like a cow, but it was not a cow, and it looked like a horse, but it was not a horse. However, in the place where the head of the beast should have been, there was a head that looked like a human head. On the back of the beast stood a tall, blood-red, and extremely ugly person. This person's forehead was extremely high, his nose was facing the sky, and two extremely long fangs were exposed at the corners of his mouth. What surprised Li Zongbao the most was that between the person's two arms, there was a thin membrane connected to his back. Who is this? Wuxia, who was next to him, also recovered. Looking at the unusually tall stone statue, she almost moaned. No, this is not a person, this is a demon. Li Zongbao narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Chapter 1390. Devil Dweller? Wuxia was shocked. Her beautiful face turned pale, and she couldn't close her mouth for a long time. It seemed this devil dweller was extremely far away from her. She never thought that she would see it here. That's right, this is a person from the devil world. Li Zongbao released his divine sense and carefully observed. He saw that the devil beasts and devil dwellers in the stone statue were all made of strange materials. His divine sense could only get close, but couldn't penetrate in the slightest. Using his divine sense to sweep the blood-red edges of the space again, Li Zongbao's face was no longer as calm as before. This was actually a complete space. Even divine sense couldn't penetrate this blood-red brilliance, let alone find any way out. Fellow Taoist Zongbao, isn't this the 1,000-foot-old man's abode? Even if we found the wrong place, it's impossible to meet a devil dweller. Have we arrived at the devil world? Wuxia said while trembling with fear. Fellow Taoist Wuxia, don't be afraid. The teleportation time just now was extremely short. It's impossible to teleport us to the devil world. Li Zongbao said firmly. Moreover, according to what I know in the sect, our Dawn Rain continent doesn't have any teleportation array that can directly connect to the devil world. Afterwards, Li Zongbao withdrew his divine sense and used his naked eyes to look at this space in the blood-red brilliance. He said in a low voice, if I's guess is correct, this place is probably under the 1,000-foot peak, or the underground near the 1,000-foot peak. Then, the 1,000-foot-old man's mantle. Wuxia bit her lips and said hatefully, the 1,000-foot-old man's mantle? I'm afraid. It's a beautiful legend. Li Zongbao sneered and said, no wonder in 1,000 years, I haven't heard of anyone obtaining the 1,000-foot-old man's mantle. Everyone who came in has already. Heaven forsaken. Wuxia exclaimed. According to Xiaohua, isn't there still a lot of loose cultivators coming? If we work together, we might have a chance of winning. Heaven forsaken? Li Zongbao smiled bitterly. He had heard from Xiaohua that before them, Jianghu and dozens of others had already entered the 1,000 Peaks cave. Now that they had appeared here, those people were no longer here, so they must have already died. Even if they were all loose cultivators who had been forsaken by the heavens, what use would it be? Just as Li Zongbao was about to speak, some of the strange runes beneath their feet suddenly began to flicker, emitting a dazzling blood-red brilliance. Quick dodge! Li Zongbao shouted. He grabbed Wuxia's hand and flashed into the air. Shwa! 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 Nearly 10 light sounds were heard. Within the huge space, 10 different runes flashed with a blood-red brilliance in 10 different places. Then, 10 groups of people abruptly appeared within the brilliance. Each group had dozens or even hundreds of people. They were the rogue cultivators who had been abandoned by the heavens. These loose cultivators had clearly fainted from the pressure of the teleportation. Most of them were lying on the ground, their eyes glazed over. Only 2 of them remained standing, looking at Li Zongbao and Wuxia in the air with interest. These 2 people were none other than Qing Fengmin and Luo Jessen. In just a moment, Qing Fengmin laughed wildly. Ha ha ha, this is really wonderful. I never dreamed that a 12th layer qi refining cultivator would come to the 1000 Zhang peak. It seems like this time's plan is really too successful. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Qing. Luo Jessen next to him cupped his hands and smiled. Ha ha ha, congratulations to you too, Qing Fengmin said with a smile. Fellow Taoist Qing. Where is this place? Ma Qingqing had already woken up. Just like Li Zongbao, he looked around in astonishment. When he heard Qing Fengmin's words, he became even more afraid and asked while trembling with fear. Where is this place? Fellow Taoist Ma, isn't this the Immortal's cave of the 1000 Zhang old man that you've been yearning for day and night? Qing Fengmin sneered. But, the Immortal's cave of the 1000 Zhang old man? How could there be these? This stone statue. Is the 1000 Zhang old man? Ma Qingqing asked bravely. Demonic beast. Demon general. There was no lack of experienced and knowledgeable disbanded cultivators who had already seen the stone statue and shouted out loud. Then, everyone's eyes were fixed on Li Zongbao and Wuxia in midair. Someone even asked tentatively, Senior, are you a disciple of the Utopia faction? Why are you with the demon dwellers? Why did you trick us to come here? Li Zongbao looked at them coldly and ignored them. He still held the jade bottle in his hand. The dark blue brilliance formed a round ball to cover himself and Wuxia. Fellow Taoist Qing. What the hell is going on? Please explain. Ma Qingqing ignored the chaos around him and shouted loudly. Ha ha ha, do you still need I to explain? Qing Fengmin laughed and flew up. He landed directly in front of the stone statue and pointed at a stone niche in the corner of the stone statue. He said with a smile, This is the 1000 Zhang old man's legacy that you've been looking for. But, this 1000 Zhang old man actually didn't leave any skills or anything like that. He just died because I sucked out all his essence and blood. You? Who the hell are you? Before Ma Qingqing could speak, a tall cultivator beside him hurriedly asked. Who I am? Don't you know? Qing Fengmin laughed loudly. Just as he laughed, he stretched out his hand and hit Luo Jessen's forehead. Luo Jessen didn't resist at all. His whole body went soft and collapsed on the ground. Then, a blood-red shadow came out of Luo Jessen's body and floated in midair with its fangs and claws bared. Ah! The surrounding cultivators were shocked and stepped back a few steps. At this moment, in front of the stone statue, another blood-red brilliance flashed. An even dimmer blood-red shadow flew out. Then, a thin and tall cultivator appeared. That cultivator was lying on the ground with his eyes closed. It was Xiaohua. Xiaohua. Not only did Li Zongbao and Wuxia exclaim, even Qing Fengmin was surprised. He didn't expect that this cultivator, who was only at the 2nd level of qi refining at that time, could pass the test and come to the 1000 Zhang peak. The blood-red shadow that had just appeared circled and flew straight to Qing Fengmin. It pounced forward and drilled into Qing Fengmin's body. Qing Fengmin's eyes slightly closed and then opened again. His eyes were filled with blood red. At the same time, he curiously stared at Xiaohua. Quick! Fellow Taoists, quickly attack this guy. Some rogue cultivator saw this strange scene and cried out in alarm. Pa-pa-hua. There was a burst of chaotic sounds. All kinds of yellow talismans were taken out from the storage bags of the rogue cultivators. They quickly flew towards Qing Fengmin. Some of the yellow talismans even hit Li Zongbao's magic weapon. Ha ha ha! How can this kind of magic power touch me? Qing Fengmin sneered and pounced forward. Similarly, a blood-red shadow flew out from Qing Fengmin's body. This blood-red shadow looked much more solid than the previous one. The blood-red shadow's facial features and limbs could all be seen clearly. Go! The blood-red shadow shouted. The blood-red shadow that escaped from Luo Jussen's body also flew up. The two blood-red shadows rushed towards the rogue cultivators with Qing Fengmin. The whistling yellow talismans simply came from the blood-red shadows. They simply couldn't cause any damage to them. The one Qing Fengmin rushed towards was Ma Qingqing. Seeing the ferocious blood-red shadow pouncing on him, Ma Qingqing was horrified. He hurriedly threw out all kinds of yellow talismans. However, in the blink of an eye, the blood-red shadow rushed into Ma Qingqing's body. It didn't stop at all and immediately came out of Ma Qingqing's body. At the same time, the blood-red shadow came out of Ma Qingqing's back. Ma Qingqing's flesh rapidly shriveled and withered. All his blood essence and magic power were sucked dry by Qing Fengmin. That wasn't all. When Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow left Ma Qingqing and pounced on another rogue cultivator on the left, Ma Qingqing's body gradually shriveled. Then, with a flash of red light, it actually emitted a blood-red flame. His entire body burned. Even his Taoist robe, storage bag, and so on were ignited little by little. The burning flame connected with the blood-red space again. Just before Ma Qingqing's remains burned, Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow pounced on several rogue cultivators in a row. Every time he pounced on a rogue cultivator, that rogue cultivator would shrivel and burn just like Ma Qingqing, and Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow would condense a little bit more. Similarly, on the other side, Luo Jussen's blood-red shadow was just as swift. It also pounced on several rogue cultivators very quickly. Ah! The rogue cultivators woke up from their daze. They activated their flying talismans and fled in all directions like headless flies, hoping to find a chance to escape in this space. Fellow cultivator Zongbao. At this time, Wuxia was completely panicked. She hugged Li Zongbao's arm with her hands. Her body trembled non-stop and her teeth chattered in fear. Li Zongbao took a breath and pulled his arm out of her embrace. He patted her shoulder and landed on the ground. He whispered, "You protect yourself. Wait for me to kill that devil." You! Wuxia stretched out her hand and grabbed Li Zongbao's sleeve extremely quickly. But then she flung it away. She bit her lips and said in a trembling voice, You be careful." Li Zongbao nodded slightly. He patted his storage bag and took out a sword talisman. He activated his magic power and a crimson flying sword appeared in the air. Li Zongbao flew up and made a sword sign in his hand. The flying sword formed by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth quickly pierced towards Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow. Qing Fengmin's tone had changed. He sneered and said, "Little thing, let's see who's faster." After that, the blood-red shadow's flying speed increased a little. Li Zongbao's flying sword could only catch up with it. It was really difficult to pierce it. In the blink of an eye, the blood essence of several rogue cultivators was sucked away by the blood-red shadow, igniting several flames. Li Zongbao's flying sword talisman did not work and immediately threw it away. In the air, he patted his hand and took out a walnut-sized bell. Li Zongbao activated his magic power and shook his wrist slightly. A crisp sound of the bell rang. Following the sound of the bell, Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow shook slightly. Its speed was obviously slower. Seeing this, Li Zongbao was overjoyed. He shook the bell in his hand one after another. Although Qing Fengmin's blood-red shadow slowed down a lot because of the sound of the bell, at the same time, another person woke up from his coma because of the sound of the bell. Chapter 1391. This person was none other than Xiaohua. The ringing of bells entered Xiaohua's ears, awakening him from his stupor. At this time, he was lying in front of the stone statue, which was precisely the stone niche that Qing Fengmin had pointed out a moment ago. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was a huge pill furnace. The pill furnace was right in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua only needed to stretch out his hand and touch one of the pill furnace's legs. Xiaohua didn't even need to think about it. His hand naturally exerted force and the pill furnace disappeared from the stone niche. When it reappeared, it was inside Xiaohua's space. Xiaohua instinctively put the pill furnace into his space. He suddenly realized, Where is this? At the same time, the cries and howls from the blood-red space reached his ears. He stood up in horror. When he looked back, he was shocked by the tragic scene in front of him. The entire space was blood-red. Although there was no blood splattering everywhere, nor were there any broken limbs flying in the air, Wherever the bloody shadow passed, a rogue cultivator's blood essence would be sucked away, a rogue cultivator's life would be reaped, and a ball of fire would burn. This silent tragedy pierced straight into Xiaohua's head. In an instant, Xiaohua recalled the scene of the blood shadow pouncing on him. Then, he looked at himself up and down in horror. Following that, he used his hands to feel all over his body. Only when he confirmed that he was still Xiaohua did he relax slightly. Xiaohua, is that you? Kai Wuxia's timid voice sounded not far from him. Xiaohua turned around and saw Kai Wuxia under the blue light. When he was about to speak, his face suddenly changed and he shouted, "Be careful!" Kai Wuxia heard and was shocked. She thought it was the blood shadow pouncing on her. But when she looked back, she saw several vicious rogue cultivators at level 5 of the Qi refining stage. They rushed into the blue light that was protecting Kai Wuxia. The jade bottle belonged to the Utopia faction, so Kai Wuxia couldn't control it. She could only hold it in her hand. When she saw several disbanded cultivators chasing after her, she could only prepare to fly away. However, when she was about to fly away, several more disbanded cultivators rushed into the blue light. These people were even more ferocious. They threw fireball spells and icicle spells at Kai Wuxia, leaving her no time to fight back. Kai Wuxia understood the meaning of these loose practitioners, but the blue light of this jade bottle was her only reliance. If she lost it, she would definitely end up like the other loose practitioners, having her blood essence devoured by the blood shadow. Kai Wuxia flew up. She still wanted to protect the jade bottle. However, when she had just flown half a foot into the air, the fireball talisman had struck her back with a series of rumbling sounds. The iron cloak talisman and the other iron cloak talismans that she had used earlier had been destroyed in a flash. If she did not give up on the jade bottle now, then she would be killed by the rogue cultivators now. She would not be able to wait for Shui Ying's arrival at all. "Let go, fellow Kai Wuxia!" Xiaohua shouted loudly from afar. Kai Wuxia sighed in her heart. She threw the jade bottle far away and flew towards Xiaohua herself. The jade bottle was thrown far away, and the deep blue light screen also swayed as it flew away. Along with it, Kai Wuxia's heart felt a bit of pity. Immediately, the remaining sense of security in Kai Wuxia's heart also disappeared without a trace. She watched as one blood-colored flame after another rose and quietly extinguished. One by one, fresh lives silently passed away like this. The shadow of death had already covered her cheeks. A kind of indescribable fear filled Kai Wuxia's heart. In an instant, Kai Wuxia's eyes fell on Li Zongbao, who was chasing after Qing Fengmin's blood shadow in vain. A kind of intense remorse appeared in her heart. And just now, that was in the cave of the Thousand Zhang Peak, those several hours of searching in the almost endless darkness, that inseparable walking, once again engraved a deep sweetness in her heart. Maybe I was wrong. What's the use of me coming to find this cultivation method? If I can follow him, even if it's a pitch-black night, there's no need to be afraid. Kai Wuxia muttered in her heart. Now, I've fallen into a desperate situation. What can I do? If it wasn't for me, how could he come to this kind of place? Remorse filled Kai Wuxia's heart, driving away that fear again. She wished she could substitute herself and let Li Zongbao safely leave this blood-colored space. Fellow Kai Wuxia. Seeing Kai Wuxia flying over somewhat stupefied and staring straight at Li Zongbao, Xiaohua frowned slightly and said in his heart, "Big sister, now is not the time for you and me to be lovey-dovey. Don't try to show your affection. Even if you stare at him for 10,000 years, it's useless." But it was not good for him to say it, so he could only remind her, "What's going on? Where is this place?" "Say, fellow Xiao, it's I who harmed you." Kai Wuxia came to her senses. With a dejected expression, she said in a low voice, "I originally wanted to repay your kindness. That's why I brought you here, but I didn't expect." As she spoke, Kai Wuxia used a few words to explain what happened just now. "Ah?" Xiaohua's eyes widened. He used his finger to point at Li Zongbao's closely chasing blood shadow and said, It's Senior Qing?" "Bah, what's Senior Qing? It's just a demon." Kai Wuxia scolded, listening to the demon's words, "This Thousand Zhang Peak is a trap. Who knows how many cultivators this guy has devoured in the past 1,000 years? Xiaohua was silent. Needless to say, this heaven-forsaken was also an organization Qing Fengmin used to send him blood food. Sigh, this organization is really meticulous. As long as it's a low-level loose cultivator, these people are at the bottom of the cultivation world. Who knows how many people die every day? Who cares? Even if the loose cultivators in Heaven Forsaken were devoured by this blood shadow, who would care? Besides, this Qing Fengmin probably still has some tricks up his sleeve. Just like Mo Zhao in Black Forest, in the end, he got a few loose cultivators and got some elixirs or cultivation methods. This can spread the name of Heaven Forsaken and attract more loose cultivators. It can also avoid some suspicion from others. It's really flawless. Xiaohua instantly understood. At the same time, all the previous suspicions also had an answer. For example, Jiang Huanqi and the others must have died in the hands of the blood shadow. What about Ma Qingqing? Xiaohua looked around, but there was no trace of him. Sigh, it's either he had good intentions but did bad things. He introduced many loose cultivators to Heaven Forsaken to save himself, but some of them became blood food for the demon. Or he's also a blood shadow of the demon. Thinking of this, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of Xiaohua's heart. Heaven Forsaken was started by 3 people. Just now, Luo Jiasin mentioned by Wuxia might be one of them. But what about the third one? The third one must also be a blood shadow like Qing Fengmin. Who is he? Fellow Taoist Wuxia, be careful. A voice came from far away. It was Li Zongbao, who was chasing after the blood shadow. He's still paying attention to me. Wuxia's remorseful heart was immediately filled with sweetness. At the same time, she also saw the blood shadow flying over from the side. That was Luo Jiasin's blood shadow, however. Wuxia only glanced at the blood shadow, then immediately fixed her eyes on Li Zongbao. For a moment, she wasn't willing to look away. Stupid woman. Xiaohua at the side naturally also saw this. He suddenly understood Wuxia's intention. This blood shadow was incomparably powerful. No yellow talisman could hurt it in the slightest. The cultivators in Heaven Forsaken, who were at the 5th level of qi refining, simply didn't have any power to resist. All magic power attacks were ineffective. Since this was the case, Wuxia naturally couldn't escape from that strange blood shadow. Since this was the case, she might as well take another look at Li Zongbao. Perhaps this one look could be engraved into her next life. Although Xiaohua cursed, a kind of feeling arose spontaneously. His heart was filled with indescribable sympathy and indescribable shock. It seemed this kind of feeling in his heart also existed. But at this time he didn't have time to think about it. What should I do? Seeing that the blood shadow was only about 3 meters away from Wuxia, this distance was practically non-existent in the eyes of the blood shadow. Devil person? Xiaohua's eyes suddenly brightened. With a wave of his hand, the devil spear in the air was taken out by him. Without hesitation, Xiaohua quickly rushed forward, directly thrusting the strange blood shadow. Ah, thrusting spear? Luo Jiasin's voice rang out from the blood shadow. He was very surprised, but its speed couldn't be reduced for a moment. In addition, Xiaohua quickly rushed forward to meet it. Just as Luo Jiasin was speaking, the spear tip still pierced the blood shadow. A strange thing happened. The blood shadow that couldn't be touched by yellow talismans and other things was actually pierced by the devil's spear. In Xiaohua's eyes, it was as if the spear had pierced the flesh of a cultivator. Luo Jiasin's blood shadow screamed, turned around and fled. Xiaohua was overjoyed. Just as he was about to give chase, he stopped again. Chapter 1392. Li Zongbao was extremely depressed. Yes, he was obviously at the peak of the aura refining stage, much higher than Qing Fengmin's 5th level aura refining blood shadow, but his flying speed just couldn't catch up with the blood shadow. The sword talisman in his hand was constantly hovering behind the blood shadow, but if he wanted to stab the blood shadow, it was extremely difficult. Moreover, what worried Li Zongbao the most was that Qing Fengmin's blood shadow seemed to be improving as it swallowed the blood essence of rogue cultivators. He couldn't tell the blood shadow's cultivation level, but he knew it when he saw the distance between them gradually increasing. After Qing Fengmin's blood shadow swallowed the blood essence of nearly 200 rogue cultivators, it easily left Li Zongbao behind. Li Zongbao's sword talisman was even less effective. Could it be that I really have to? Li Zongbao was somewhat hesitant. Just now, he was extremely worried about Wuxia and wanted to use his last resort. But it was already too late. Later, Xiaohua unexpectedly attacked and repelled the blood shadow. While Li Zongbao was pleasantly surprised, he didn't think about it for the time being, but the current situation was somewhat bad. Unfortunately, this wasn't the worst situation. The thing that made Li Zongbao scratch his head the most was what happened after the cigarette. After Qing Fengmin's blood shadow devoured the blood essence of nearly 300 individual cultivators, it suddenly let out a shrill laugh. In a hurry, Qing Fengmin's blood shadow shook slightly and actually tore apart from the middle of the blood shadow. The two halves of the blood shadow squirmed for a while and became two complete blood shadows. However, the flying speed of these two blood shadows was obviously slower. This. Not only was Li Zongbao shocked, but also Xiaohua and Wuxia who were watching from afar. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you quickly go and help fellow Taoist Zongbao. If the blood shadow swallows all the rogue cultivators, you and I will have no chance of survival. Wuxia bit her lip and said. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and shook his head slightly. Fellow Taoist Kai, it's not that I don't want to help. Senior Li's flying speed is so fast, but he can't catch up with the blood shadow. Do you think I can catch up? Instead of worrying about one thing and losing the other, I might as well protect you first and see if there's any chance in the end. Xiaohua hesitated and said in a low voice. Moreover, from what I see, since Senior Li can take out a jade bottle magic tool, don't tell me he doesn't have other magic tools? He has divine sense, he should have no problem using magic tools, but he hasn't used them all this time, I'm afraid. Waiting for an opportunity? So it's like this. Wuxia's was confused. True's true essences, True's life, true life's true essence. A crisp sound, the small two, the sword. It's the sword S, the swords, S, it's. Li Zongbao took out the flying sword. Without the slightest hesitation, he urged the magic power in his body. His flying speed suddenly increased, and he quickly caught up with the blood shadow. The sword pierced into the blood shadow. That blood shadow was also alert. Seeing the flying sword about to pierce it, it hastily changed its direction. Chi La, the flying sword streaked across a corner of the blood shadow and flew to the side. The blood shadow also wriggled for a while. The place where the flying sword pierced was like boiling water. After it calmed down, the color of blood faded a little. Good. Seeing the flying sword's effect, Li Zongbao's heart couldn't help but tremble. The corners of his mouth revealed a smile. However, due to the urgency of the situation, Li Zongbao not only didn't increase his speed to chase after Xiaohua, he actually slowed down and only followed from a distance. But then, Li Zongbao's next move made Xiaohua feel like he was struck by lightning. Although Li Zongbao's figure fell behind, the flying sword had already left his hand. Under the control of his sword technique, the flying sword seemed to be pinched in his hand. It was extremely nimble as it pierced towards the blood shadow. Moreover, the flying sword's speed was much faster than his flying speed. It was able to catch up with the blood shadow. That blood shadow seemed to be extremely frightened. It tried its best to escape. It fluttered helplessly in the entire bloody space, only wanting to avoid the flying sword. On the other hand, Li Zongbao was in hot pursuit. Every time he activated the flying sword, he would stab the blood shadow from an unavoidable angle. Every time he stabbed, the blood shadow would boil for a moment, and the blood-colored brilliance would also weaken a little. Xiaohua held the devil spear's tip in his hand and stood in front of Wuxia. His eyes were fixed on Li Zongbao like a wooden chicken. Looking at his infatuation, he was simply paying more attention than Wuxia. However, what Xiaohua paid attention to was the sword technique in Li Zongbao's hand. Xiaohua himself had used the flying sword talisman before. However, the flying sword talisman was completely different from this flying sword technique. When Xiaohua controlled the flying sword talisman, he didn't feel anything. However, today, when he suddenly saw Li Zongbao use the flying sword technique and saw the sword technique in Li Zongbao's hand, he felt an extremely familiar feeling. The feeling Xiao Hua had when he saw Xiao Yuehong's pill refining technique was exactly the same. So much so that the 5 fingers of Xiao Hua's empty left hand had already begun to faintly move. The technique that didn't take shape was actually even more mysterious than Li Zongbao's sword technique, and even more agile. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Just as Xiao Hua was immersed in the pleasure of using the technique, Kai Wuxia's anxious voice rang in his ears. Ah! Fellow Taoist Kai. Xiao Hua woke up. At this time, Li Zongbao had already chased the blood shadow into an extremely sorry state. The blood shadow's bloody color had become extremely thin again. Quickly look over there. Kai Wuxia woke up Xiao Hua, who had been standing blankly for a long time, and pointed behind him. Ah? Xiao Hua turned his head, his face revealing a panicked expression. As it turned out, during the time Xiao Hua was standing blankly, Li Zongbao admittedly defeated the blood shadow so badly that it almost didn't have any power to retaliate. However, the other 2 blood shadows had devoured all of the independent cultivators who had been forsaken by the heavens. Only within the deep blue brilliance of the Utmost Happiness faction's magic artifact Jade Bottle, there were still a dozen or so cultivators standing inside, trembling. They had very pitifully pinned their hopes on this magic artifact. And at their feet, there were also a dozen or so corpses of independent cultivators. These corpses weren't devoured by the blood shadows, but, because they were fighting over the space within the brilliance, they had been killed by the blood shadows. Jie. The 2 blood shadows let out arrogant sounds in midair. They swooped down on the ground and swept through all of the corpses. The blood and flesh of those independent cultivators who had just been killed were also devoured by them. Urgently, the 2 blood shadows surrounded the deep blue brilliance and rapidly circled around it a few times, as if they were very afraid of that brilliance. However, just as the independent cultivators within the brilliance revealed a trace of luck or rejoicing in their eyes, the 2 blood shadows let out an extremely ear-piercing shriek at the same time. That shriek almost pierced Xiao Hua's ears. In the midst of this sharp shriek, the blue brilliance emitted by the jade bottle was shattered into pieces like colored glass. This is bad. Seeing this, Xiao Hua suddenly felt like he had been teased in his heart. The brilliance of this jade bottle could clearly be easily broken by the blood shadows, but the blood shadows didn't break the brilliance first. Instead, they drove the independent cultivators who had been abandoned by the heavens to hide inside first, letting the independent cultivators kill each other, letting them feel lucky in their hearts. Once the blood shadows finished devouring the other independent cultivators, they would deal with the independent cultivators who were safely hiding inside the brilliance. Sure enough, the dozen or so cultivators were simply no match for the 2 blood shadows in a single round. No matter how they wailed, how they fled, and how they threw out all of their yellow talismans, they couldn't escape the fate of being pierced through. They couldn't escape the fate of being burned to ashes. This is bad. Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization and shouted, "It's a diversion!" Of course, when Xiao Hua turned his head to look at Li Zongbao again, sure enough, the blood shadow that was being chased by Li Zongbao's flying sword was no longer in a sorry state. It let out a shriek in midair, revealing a kind of complacency and arrogance. "Mr. Zongbao, be careful." Kai Wuxia couldn't help but shout. The blood shadow that was being chased by the flying sword sat cross-legged in the air and flew toward the other 2 thick blood shadows. At the same time, the other 2 blood shadows also went to meet it. Li Zongbao's face seemed to be pale, and he drove the flying sword to chase behind the blood shadow. Immediately afterward, about 10 feet to the left of Xiao Hua, the 3 blood shadows collided. Another shocking scene occurred. The 3 blood shadows didn't stop at all. With a bang sound, they collided with each other. The entire blood shadow merged into a thick mass of blood, rolling unceasingly in the air. Quick! Li Zongbao also flew to Kai Wuxia's side at this time. He made a sword gesture in his hand, and the flying sword pierced into the blood ball with a poof. However, this time, it was far less effective than before. The flying sword was only able to penetrate half a centimeter before it could no longer move. Just as Li Zongbao was about to activate his spiritual power, a ferocious human head suddenly popped out from the blood ball. It opened its bloody mouth and bit the flying sword. With a crunching sound, the flying sword was chewed into pieces. "Ah!" Li Zongbao exclaimed, as if he was in great pain. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. Obviously, The destruction of the flying sword injured his mind to a certain extent. Fellow Taoist Zongbao. Wuxia was more nervous than anyone else. She hurried over, but before she could get close, the blood ball underwent an even more astonishing change. The hideous human head that swallowed the flying sword didn't disappear. The whole blood ball shook violently. Then, the human head gradually grew out of the blood ball, growing taller and taller. Behind the human head was a neck, shoulders. Finally, it turned into a complete blood-colored human figure. Ha ha ha. The blood man laughed. It was Qing Fengmin's voice. Fellow Taoist Li. You've been busy for a long time, are you tired? If you are tired, then take a rest. Let this senior take over your cultivation. How about it? Take over? Xiao Hua was shocked when he heard this. He seemed to have realized something. This senior's human figure can't be used for a long time. I just need to find a suitable one. You, a peak qi refining cultivator, actually came to join in the fun. This senior actually got a bargain. Ha ha ha, who knows, I might even be able to take a peek into the foundation establishment realm of cultivation. Chapter 1393. The bloody man's entire body floated in the air. It was as if countless black blood was rapidly flowing inside his body. It was incomparably strange. Wuxia and Xiao Hua's faces were deathly pale. Because from the imposing manner of this bloody man, Xiao Hua and the others faintly felt that this bloody man's strength should be close to that of a foundation establishment cultivator. However, Li Zongbao, who was still somewhat pale a moment ago, calmed down at this moment. His figure also floated into the air and stood straight in front of the bloody man. He coldly stared at him. After a moment, he also raised his head and laughed loudly. Demons are demons after all. They only know how to fight and fight. Even if they learned a little in the human world, they still dare to be arrogant? Let me tell you, when you are scheming against I is also scheming against you. As he spoke, Li Zongbao slapped his hand and took out a shiny object from his storage bag. With a wave of his hand, the shiny object rapidly flew into the air and immediately turned into a net that directly enveloped the blood figure. The blood figure was unable to react in time and was submerged in the net. You! What are you doing? The bloody figure was somewhat puzzled. However, Li Zongbao did not answer. He very strangely flipped his hand and hit the top of his head. An extremely bright brilliance soared into the sky, and directly shot above the space where the bloody mist was condensed. The bloody mist was scattered in all directions, revealing a large area of mountain rocks. It turned out that this bloody space was still within the Thousand-Zhang Peak. Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked carefully. Right at the top of Li Zongbao's head, there was a sparkling and translucent talisman. That talisman was not made of talisman paper, so Xiao Hua could not see what it was. He only knew that the bright brilliance was emitted from that talisman. Top-grade talisman. Wuxia took a deep breath and exclaimed in a low voice. Talisman. Xiao Hua woke up. Just now, Li Zongbao had definitely shot out a talisman. This was something that was not commonly seen in the cultivation world. However, this talisman is stuck on Li Zongbao's head. What does it have to do with scheming against that demon? The talisman that was inserted into the blood shadow didn't seem to have any effect. Xiao Hua was very puzzled, but Li Zongbao immediately gave a very clear answer. Li Zongbao formed a hand seal and his right hand gently removed the jade talisman from his head. Once the jade talisman was removed from Li Zongbao's head, it immediately turned into a ball of light and flew into Li Zongbao's forehead. Enhance magic power? Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. And the instant the ball of light entered Li Zongbao's forehead, an indescribable pressure came from Li Zongbao's body. That pressure couldn't be suppressed and filled the entire blood-colored space. Moreover, what Xiao Hua didn't understand the most was that the pressure was actually rising all the way. Foundation establishment. Xiao Hua moaned with great difficulty. It was a realm that he could only dream of. Wuxia's face was even more splendid. First, she was concerned, then puzzled, then pleasantly surprised, and finally, her face turned ashen. As the pressure on Li Zongbao's body continued to increase, Li Zongbao's body emitted an extremely large suction force. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the blood-colored space couldn't be suppressed and poured into Li Zongbao's body. Not only that, a burst of muffled cha-cha sounds rang out. A few thunderclaps resounded on the 1,000-zhang peak. One after another, sparkling and translucent beads that could be seen with the naked eye suddenly appeared on the 1,000-zhang peak. They were the condensed spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew. These condensed spiritual qi of heaven and earth suddenly condensed into the blood-colored space where Li Zongbao was, completely ignoring the existence of any stone walls. Similarly, the blood-colored fog that originally enveloped the entire cave was blown away without a trace by the gust of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, revealing the original appearance of the cave. Heavens, Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Li Zongbao could have set foot in the Foundation Establishment stage long ago. It was only because of some reason that he used the Utmost Happiness faction's secret talisman to suppress his own cultivation level. Only at this moment did he directly ascend to the Foundation Establishment stage. Originally, Xiaohua didn't know how powerful a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator was. But now that he saw the massive amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth flocking over, he didn't know how many times more the amount of spiritual qi in Li Zongbao's body's meridians was compared to his qi refinement stage. He knew how big the difference between Li Zongbao's magic power at the peak of qi refinement stage level 12 and the initial stage of Foundation Establishment was. This difference absolutely couldn't be measured by quantity. Sure enough, seeing that Li Zongbao had actually advanced to the Foundation Establishment stage, Qing Fengmin's blood figure also revealed an expression of astonishment. Just as Li Zongbao was absorbing the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth to complete the accumulation of Foundation Establishment magic power, the blood figure hurriedly moved, preparing to split into several different blood shadows. However, that blood shadow churned several times and couldn't split up. It could only become a single blood shadow and flee towards the outside of the stone walls. Unfortunately, at this moment, Li Zongbao was advancing to the Foundation Establishment stage. The surrounding space was restricted. Li Zongbao simply ignored it and closed his eyes to savor the new realm he had just attained. Waiting for the surrounding spiritual qi to disappear, Li Zongbao withdrew the magic power within his body. The pressure he released also abruptly disappeared. Only then did he coldly say, "Don't even think about escaping for now. The surrounding space won't be released for the next hour." Haha, is that so? That blood figure suddenly transformed into a blood shadow again and laughed loudly. Want to split up? Li Zongbao sneered. I was waiting for you to condense into a human form. How could I give you the chance? Stop dreaming, prepare to die. As he spoke, Li Zongbao slapped his storage bag. A ring emitting crimson flames appeared in the air. Once the ring flew into the air, it immediately began to spin. As it spun, it gradually increased in speed. Li Zongbao stood steadily in mid-air. His divine sense drove the ring, and with a hand seal, the ring flew toward the blood shadow. In the blink of an eye, the ring flew above the blood shadow. A huge suction force was emitted from the spinning ring. The blood shadow seemed to know the power of the ring. The entire blood shadow flew out from the stone wall and rapidly flew to other places in the cave. The blood shadow's speed was undeniably fast. If it was the Li Zongbao before the Foundation Establishment stage, he definitely wouldn't be able to catch up. However, Li Zongbao didn't chase after it. His divine sense had already enveloped the entire cave. Wherever the blood shadow flew, the ring would immediately fly there under the control of his divine sense. And every time it flew above the blood shadow, a large piece of the blood shadow would be pulled down and thrown into the whirlpool of the ring. In the time it took to eat a meal, half of the blood shadow had been sucked in by the ring. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the blood shadow turned sharply in the air and swooped down, rushing towards Xianxia. How could Xiaohua let him succeed? He couldn't catch up to the blood shadow. Wasn't he waiting for the moment when the blood shadow would chase after him? Therefore, Xiaohua rushed in front of Xianxia without hesitation. The tip of the demonic spear thrust forward and stabbed the blood shadow. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the blood shadow flew backwards. At this moment, Li Zongbao's ring also arrived. Li Zongbao's face was slightly angry. He opened his mouth and spat out a stream of life essence onto the ring. The ring suddenly enlarged several times and the suction force also increased sharply. Ah! Just as the blood shadow screamed, it was firmly sucked in by the ring. Li Zongbao's face was pale. Spitting out 2 mouthfuls of life essence in a row just now was still too much for him. With a point of his finger, the ring gradually shrank and flew in front of Li Zongbao. However, the ring only shrank a little and couldn't shrink anymore. It seemed that it couldn't return to its previous state. As for the blood shadow in the ring, it turned into a blood ball and faintly rotated in the ring. Moreover, it was still expanding from time to time. Gaga, Qing Fengmin's voice sounded again. Foundation Establishment Cultivator, is nothing more than this. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Looking at the blood ball in the air, Li Zongbao bit his lips and opened his storage pouch. After looking at it for a while, Li Zongbao raised his head and said, I will only ask you one question. Are you willing to answer? Answer? Why should I answer you? If you answer, I promise not to take your life. Senior. Li. Wuxia's face was deathly pale. She cried out in alarm, somewhat unaccustomed. This devil has harmed countless of my cultivators. How can I spare its life? Gaga, what does little girl know? You, Senior Li, can't take my life, so you had no choice but to use this method. Presumably. His question is also the reason why he appeared on Thousandjiang Peak. Hearing this, Wuxia's expression became even more miserable. She immediately lowered her head and said no more. Li Zongbao glanced at Wuxia and turned to the blood shadow. 2 years ago, at Thousandjiang Peak, did you, Tianqi, meet a disciple of the Utopia faction called Li Mingyang? Li Mingyang of the Utopia faction? 2 years ago, I did something at Thousandjiang Peak. However, there were many cultivators at that time. How can I remember? If you don't remember, then I can't promise you. Li Zongbao said coldly. Li Mingyang was about 13 years old, level 5 of the qi refining stage. He had a small red mole on his forehead and spoke very childishly. Ha ha ha, I remember now. So he was from the Utopia faction. A little cultivator at level 5 of the qi refining stage actually dared to show off in front of me. I just swallowed his blood essence. That's it. As the blood shadow spoke, the head of a 13-year-old child appeared in the blood ball and asked, Is this person? Ah yes. Li Zongbao sighed and didn't speak again. Okay, I already answered your question. You have to keep your promise and let me go. The blood shadow said angrily. When did I promise you? I only said I wouldn't take your life. I didn't say I would let you go. Li Zongbao sneered. Besides, even if I don't take your life, others can't take your life. You. The blood shadow was furious. The whole blood ball in the ring rapidly expanded. When Xiaohua heard Li Zongbao's question earlier, he already understood in his heart. The devil's spear in his hand was already ready. Hearing Li Zongbao's answer, how could he not know that he had to make a move? Xiaohua circulated his magic power and flew into the air. The tip of the demonic spear gathered in front of him and pierced towards the ball of blood. Xiaohua, I took care of you in every possible way. I even gave you the method of making talismans. The blood ball said urgently in Qing Fengmin's voice. Besides, I also know how to get rid of you. However, how could Xiaohua dare to let it live for a moment longer? When Qing Fengmin finished speaking, Xiaohua's devil spear immediately pierced into the blood ball. A black light circled around the blood ball and the blood ball immediately stopped surging. Soon after, it rapidly shrank. The huge blood ball actually disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1394. Xiaohua flew into the air and stabbed the devil spear tip into the rolling blood ball without hesitation. The blood ball seemed to be afraid of the devil spear tip in Xiaohua's hand and was already rolling violently inside the ring, emitting a sharp whistling sound. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to be able to stop the spear tip from piercing in. When the spear tip pierced in, the blood ball immediately stopped rolling and then rapidly shrunk before disappearing in a moment. So effective? Xiaohua looked and frowned slightly, seemingly puzzled. Is this devil spear tip more effective against devils than against cultivators? At this moment, Xiaohua tightly grasped the devil spear tip and a trace of scalding heat came from the cold spear tip. What's going on? Xiaohua was stunned. At this moment, Li Zongbao behind Xiaohua clapped his hands and laughed. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Xiao, for personally killing the devils and eliminating a disaster for the cultivators of my Dawn Rain continent. Following Li Zongbao's voice, He pointed his finger and the ring spiraled back into its original shape and flew into Li Zongbao's hand. I don't dare. It's all Senior Li's credit. Junior doesn't dare to claim credit. Xiaohua quickly bowed and said in panic. Not at all. If it wasn't for this devil weapon in fellow Taoist Zhao's hand, I'm afraid I wouldn't have the strength to kill the thief. Li Zongbao smiled and put the ring into his storage bag. He looked at the devil's spear tip in Xiaohua's hand and said, Can I take a look? Of course. Senior Li's eyes are like torches. Junior is holding the devil's spear tip exchanged from Jingbo City's E.G. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and quickly handed over the spear tip. Li Zongbao said and was about to take the spear tip. Senior, be careful. This thing is extremely heavy. Xiaohua handed it over and reminded. Okay, Li Zongbao reached out and took it. However, he still underestimated the weight of the spear tip. His arm sank and the spear tip almost fell out of his hand. Li Zongbao was shocked and hurriedly urged his magic power to hold the spear tip and didn't lose face. Alas, there's always someone better. Li Zongbao looked left and right at the tip of the spear, but he didn't see any clues. He sighed and returned the tip of the spear to Xiaohua. Seeing Xiaohua easily catch it, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. I wouldn't dare. Junior only has this little bit of brute force. Compared to Senior's mountain-like cultivation, the difference is still too great. Xiaohua said respectfully. Fellow Taoist Wuxia. Li Zongbao turned to look at Wuxia, whose face was still pale. I wouldn't dare. Senior Li. Please call me Wuxia. Now that Senior is a foundation establishment cultivator, I can no longer use the previous title. Wuxia bit her lip and said in a low voice. This. Li Zongbao was at a loss for words. He didn't use the jade talisman to suppress his cultivation deliberately to hide anything. He just wanted to stay at the peak of the aura refining stage to comprehend more and delay the time of entering the foundation establishment stage. How could he have thought that he would break through here? Thus he smiled bitterly and said, I was ordered by my master to suppress my cultivation level. The longer I suppress it, the better my progress in the foundation establishment stage will be. I didn't mean to deceive you. Ha! There's such a thing? Xiaohua's heart stirred and he secretly rejoiced. This is a trick. In that case, Senior Li also came to 1,000 feet peak on the orders of your master. Wuxia said coldly. This is indeed so. Li Zongbao sighed. Li Mingyang is the direct descendant of one of Ai's martial uncles. 2 years ago, he traveled through the state of Xi and disappeared without a trace. According to the sex information, the last place he appeared was 1,000 feet peak. I indeed came to search for him on the orders of my martial uncles. Senior Li saw that I had Elder 1,000 Feet's keepsake, so you deigned to befriend me, right? Wuxia's face became increasingly pale. Seeing this, Xiaohua secretly cursed. This girl seems to have dug herself into a dead end. Sure enough, Li Zongbao pondered for a moment and could only reply, if fellow Taoist Kai says so, I also can't deny it. But immediately after he said, however, I don't have any extravagant hopes for Elder 1,000 Feet's legacy. This 1,000 Feet Peaks cultivation method and other items, as previously mentioned, will still be given to fellow Taoist Kai. Oh, and fellow Taoist Xiao. As he spoke, Li Zongbao turned his head and pointed at the stone niche of the stone statue. Unfortunately, the stone niche was completely empty at this moment. There was nothing there at all. Ha! This. Li Zongbao was very surprised and frowned. It seems like there's something inside? Xiaohua sweated profusely. Wasn't that the first place he saw when he woke up? Wasn't that the pill furnace he took away when he woke up? Just when Xiaohua didn't know whether to take out the pill furnace or not, he heard Wuxia say coldly. The devil said clearly that Elder 1,000 Feet had already died in his hands. It's been 1,000 years. Haven't Elder 1,000 Feet's cultivation methods, pills, and other items long disappeared? Although Tianqi had so many cultivation methods, where did the cultivation methods and pills that the devil dwellers had when they were created come from? Aren't they all Elder 1,000 Feet's things? He said that Elder 1,000 Feet's mantle was in this stone niche. I'm afraid it was there before, but he took it away long ago. Li Zongbao nodded slightly. To be honest, everyone was panicking at that time and only thought about how to escape. Who would look carefully? Xiao Hua's heart also calmed down a little. What Wuxia wanted was a cultivation method, but what he took was a pill furnace. The two were unrelated. Ai, what a pity. Tianqi's loose cultivator storage bags were all destroyed by the devil fire. Otherwise, maybe we could find some cultivation methods. Li Zongbao looked around and sighed again. Yeah. Xiao Hua's heart jumped. Why didn't he think of it earlier? Otherwise, he could take advantage of the fact that the storage bags were not destroyed and snatch one or two. Although my Luyang Kai family is only a cultivation family, we still have cultivation methods for the 5th or 6th level of qi refining. We don't need to take them from loose cultivators. Wuxia clenched her teeth and said. Li Zongbao's face slightly changed. Seeing that the mood of the two people was not right, Xiao Hua hurriedly interrupted. Senior, this devil has already been destroyed. The blood fog in the cave has also been dispersed, but how do we get out? Li Zongbao released his divine sense and looked for a long time. He pointed at the huge stone statue and said, There is a passage under this stone statue. It leads to the 1,000 feet peaks cave. Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he heard this. He walked in front of the stone statue and looked at this strange thing from top to bottom. He used the tip of the devil's spear to randomly poke the stone statue. Finally, he shouted loudly and pushed with force. The huge stone statue was actually overturned by him. After a loud sound, it scattered into countless small pieces. Right under the stone statue, there was a black hole that led to the outside. Senior Li, Junior will lead the way. Senior, please bring up the rear. Xiao Hua asked respectfully. Okay. Li Zongbao nodded. Before Xiao Hua took a step, he looked left and right again, as if looking for something. Li Zongbao pointed and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, there are 2 corpses over there. They are the bodies of the 2 loose cultivators that Blood Shadow occupied. It seems that they haven't been destroyed yet. Go and see if there are any storage bags. Is that so? Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised. He directly flew over. Sure enough, on the ground extremely far away, there were 2 storage bags hanging on the corpses of Qing Fengmin and Luo Jessen. Xiao Hua grabbed them one by one and pulled them down. Fellow Taoist Xiao, it's better to destroy these 2 corpses. Li Zongbao's voice came. Yes, Senior Li. Xiao Hua didn't find it strange when he heard this. He casually used a basic fireball technique. 2 wicker-sized fireballs fell on the corpses of the 2 people. Soon after, they started burning. Let's go. We'll talk when we get outside. Li Zongbao waited for Xiao Hua to come closer and said. Soon after, Xiao Hua walked in front and Li Zongbao followed behind. Wuxia's face was covered in frost. She coldly walked in the middle and went out of the cave. The 3 people walked for a long time. About 4 hours later, on the cave stone wall, where Blood Shadow initially wanted to escape, a wisp of blood slowly squirmed. It passed through the stone wall and quickly floated in the air. The direction it went wasn't slanted or not slanted. It was precisely Yellow Flower Ridge. Just as the wisp of Blood Shadow was escaping, in a mountain peak more than 10 li east of 1,000 feet peak, in a rather large cave, Xiao Hua handed 2 storage bags to Wuxia and said, Fellow Taoist Kai, according to fellow Taoist's instructions, I divided the things in these 2 storage bags into 2 portions. Fellow Taoist Kai, please choose by yourself. Wuxia looked at the 2 storage bags in front of her without the slightest care and said, There isn't even a foundation establishment cultivation method. It's the same no matter which one I choose. As she spoke, she casually took 1 storage bag. And Xiao Hua also very naturally tied the other storage bag to his waist. Fellow Taoists, what plans do you 2 have? Li Zongbao suddenly asked. Reporting to Senior, Junior. I'm only at the 3rd level of the qi refining stage. I just got a cultivation method from Qing Fengmin's storage bag that can be practiced to the 5th level of the qi refining stage. Naturally, I want to find a place to meditate. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Hee, meditating is admittedly good, but everyone's method may not be the same. Li Zongbao laughed and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao previously practiced for a long time in Shanghuaming and was still at the 1st level of the qi refining stage. You just left Shanghuaming for half a year and broke through to the 3rd level of the qi refining stage. In I's opinion, fellow Taoist should travel more. Yes, Junior understands. What about fellow Taoist Kai? Li Zongbao pretended to be indifferent and said. What about Senior Li? Kai Wuxia didn't answer at all and asked back. Sigh, because I suddenly entered the foundation establishment stage, I haven't made sufficient preparations and my realm hasn't stabilized. I want to go into seclusion here and wait until my foundation establishment stage has stabilized. Then I'll immediately return to the utmost happiness faction and report Li Mingyang's matter to Martial Uncle. Li Zongbao answered honestly. Hearing this, Kai Wuxia's face first showed a hint of joy, but then it returned to its usual coldness. She cupped her hands and said, Junior congratulates Senior Li once again for entering the ranks of the foundation establishment stage. Junior still has to work hard for the future of my Kai family, so I won't accompany you here any longer. Goodbye. After saying this, she didn't even say goodbye to Xiaohua and hurriedly walked out of the cave. Fellow Taoist Kai. Li Zongbao walked out quickly. When he came out, Kai Wuxia had already activated the flight talisman and flew into the air. Fellow Taoist Wuxia. Li Zongbao called out in a low voice. He could obviously fly and chase after her, but he could only open his mouth and call out, then put his hand down again. Chapter 1395. Senior Li. Xiaohua caught up from behind. Seeing the two people like this, he sighed in his heart and cupped his hands. Junior, farewell. Oh, okay. Li Zongbao said. He clapped his hands and took out 2 message amulets from his storage bag. He handed them to Xiaohua and said, Fellow cultivator Xiao, meeting is fate. Moreover, we can be considered to have gone through life and death. This is I's message amulet. Keep it. If fate wills it, we can meet again at the extreme happiness sect of Lian country. Xiaohua looked at the 2 message amulets and was slightly stunned. But then he understood. He reached out and said with a smile, Junior understands. If fate wills it, we fellow cultivators who have gone through life and death can meet again. After Li Zongbao nodded with a smile, he looked sideways at the direction Kai Wuxia flew away. No one knew what he was thinking. Xiaohua knew his mood. He cupped his hands and flew away without saying anything. But after flying for a while, he immediately landed. Nonsense. There was a foundation establishment cultivator who was on good terms with him in seclusion nearby. What was he afraid of? He must first find a place nearby and familiarize himself with the fire-type cultivation method. Then, he would organize the pill furnace and elixirs he got from the 1,000 feet peak. Xiaohua searched for a long time and found a very hidden cave. He used a huge mountain rock to block the entrance of the cave. Then, he embedded the moonlight stone in the cave's stone wall. With the help of the moonlight stone's brilliance, Xiaohua took out the raising fire to burn the heavens cultivation method that he had just obtained. He carefully read it several times and memorized the contents. Then, he put it into his space and closed his eyes to think. This so-called raising fire to burn the heavens cultivation method seems very shallow. It's much simpler than Shang Huaming's cultivation method. It can't be said to be profound. It must be one of the very low-level cultivation methods in the sect. Moreover, the flow of true qi and the activation of magic power in this cultivation method are all rough. It even feels a little crude. It's far from being as delicate and gentle as Shang Huaming's cultivation method. Could it be? This is the difference between a water-type cultivation method and a fire-type cultivation method? Then, should I look for a higher-level cultivation technique? Or should I just practice this low-level cultivation method? Xiaohua was a bit hesitant, but immediately after, he let out a laugh and said to himself, Come on, this low-level cultivation method was obtained by chance. Who knows when I'll be able to obtain a high-level cultivation method again? How can I wait? Presumably, Xiaohua concentrated his breath, closed his eyes, and silently operated the mental cultivation method that he had just memorized. While throwing the marrow cleansing pill into his mouth, he circulated and refined his true qi in his new meridians. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua opened his eyes. His expression was slightly happy. It's really not bad. This fire-type constitution really needs a fire-type cultivation method. Although this raising fire to burn the heavens cultivation method is relatively low level, but My cultivation speed is actually faster than Shang Huaming's cultivation method. It's almost twice as fast. If I calculate it this way, my cultivation speed will be shortened by a lot compared to ordinary cultivators. However, there are also some difficulties. This marrow cleansing pill isn't very useful. Its effect isn't even half of that of the Clear Breeze pill. On the other hand, although the Clear Breeze pill doesn't use the same spiritual herbs as the marrow cleansing pill, its effect is about the same as the second layer of qi refining. However, there are still some strange places. There are many details of true qi refinement. This raising fire to burn the heavens cultivation method clearly doesn't record them, but when I practice, I can actually repair them on my own. This can't be because of my meridians, right? Thinking of this, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the dragon jade. Looking at the dragon jade that was missing a dragon head, Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Dragon transformation art, oh dragon transformation art, even if this poor Taoist obtains you, how can he cultivate? In Xiaohua's mind, the obscure dragon transformation art flowed like a small stream. Unfortunately, he wanted to, but he was powerless. He didn't know how to start. Right, I didn't come out empty-handed on Thousand Zhang Peak. In addition to a storage pouch, I also obtained a pill furnace. Kai Wuxia and Li Zongbao probably never dreamed of it. Xiaohua's heart burned with passion as he put away the dragon jade. Not bothering to look inside the storage pouch, he first took out the pill furnace. After all, he already had the alchemy manual, as well as the pill formulas, as well as the spiritual plants in the space. Now that he had the pill furnace, if he still couldn't concoct pills, then even the heavens wouldn't tolerate it. Xiaohua waved his hand and threw the alchemy furnace into the cave. The milky white brilliance of the moonlight evenly sprinkled on the alchemy furnace. The alchemy furnace unexpectedly flashed a faint light on its own. Xiaohua very gently walked to the front of the alchemy furnace and placed his hand on it. There were veined patterns on the alchemy furnace. Touching those veined patterns, a delicate and gentle feeling spontaneously arose. Xiaohua gently caressed it and slowly enjoyed this feeling. The feeling transmitted from his fingertips made his heart itch incomparably. He almost, right now, wanted to start alchemy. Once Xiaohua had his fill of caressing the cauldron, he retreated a few steps and carefully sized up the cauldron. The cauldron was very tall, and Xiaohua could only reach one of the cauldron's openings. Looking at the cauldron's 3 legs, the cauldron's nearly spherical cauldron had 5 openings for placing herbs. And on top of the pill furnace, there was a small bird standing there. Ha! How come this pill furnace is different from Shang Huaming's Jianghu? I remember that pill furnace only had one place for medicine. What is this little bird doing? Why would it refine a little bird on top of the pill furnace for no reason? Right, there are also veined patterns on the outside of the pill furnace. The tentacles are very vivid, as if they can move. It doesn't seem like runes. Xiaohua was a bit puzzled. He walked closer and saw that the pill furnace's 5 openings were all open. Xiaohua took out a moonstone and placed it inside the pill furnace. Before he could carefully look inside the pill furnace, his eyes saw that there was a blood-red manual lying quietly inside the pill furnace. Cultivation method. Thousand Zhang Old Man's cultivation method. Xiaohua was overjoyed. His empty left hand formed a seal. It was the basic spell he had just learned. Telekinesis technique. That blood-red manual immediately flew into Xiaohua's hand. When Xiaohua carefully looked at it, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was a manual with a blood-red cover. On it were written the words, Blood Shadow Technique. Just these 3 words were like a bucket of cold water that extinguished the fire in Xiaohua's heart. When he opened the book and flipped through it, it was even more ice-cold. What was written in the book was a cultivation method of the Devil Realm. It was about how to refine the blood essence of others into one's own blood shadow. And this blood shadow was precisely the blood shadow that Xiaohua saw in Thousandjiang Peak, the blood shadow that drilled out of Qing Fengmin's body. However, the blood shadow was admittedly powerful, but, after all, it was a cultivation method of the Devil Realm. Xiaohua, as a cultivator of the human realm, why would he cultivate the blood shadow technique? Sigh, I was happy for nothing again. Xiaohua thought. He slapped his hand, and magic power spread out. He wanted to destroy this blood shadow technique manual. This kind of cultivation method of the Devil Realm was really evil. It actually used a cultivator's blood essence as a cultivation method to refine it into one's own cultivation method. It really couldn't be allowed to exist in this world. However, just when Xiao Hua's palm slapped the cover of the manual, he suddenly stopped. A thunderclap sounded in his head, illuminating his entire heart. His figure seemed to be imprisoned by millions of confinement talismans, completely motionless. His eyes were really round, and his mouth was wide open. How did I become an idiot? Countless thoughts instantly turned in Xiao Hua's mind. In the end, only this sentence remained: how did I become an idiot? I thought that this blood shadow technique was a sinister technique and couldn't be cultivated. But how could I forget? I have a dragon transformation art, but I can't cultivate this dragon transformation art. And in my body, there might be a living meridian. This meridian seems to be able to cultivate the dragon transformation art. Although I can't cultivate the dragon transformation art, but I can use the blood shadow cultivation method of the blood shadow technique to control my meridian and cultivate. With a paw sound, Xiao Hua woke up from his stupor. He slapped his forehead and rejoiced. Luckily, I didn't recklessly destroy the blood shadow technique. Otherwise, I'll really regret it for the rest of my life. Xiao Hua rejoiced as he thought. Soon after, Xiao Hua didn't bother to check the pill furnace anymore. He first put away the pill furnace, and only used the brilliance of the moonlight stone to bitterly study the blood shadow technique. This blood shadow technique was originally a technique of the demon realm. The contents of the technique weren't something that Xiao Hua could understand and cultivate at the moment. However, he could only use the technique of controlling other people's flesh and blood as a reference. It was a lot easier for him. Xiao Hua only spent a few days of effort to comprehend it. Of course, this was only comprehension. It couldn't be said that he could really cultivate it. Therefore, Xiao Hua waited for this technique to take shape. He immediately impatiently used this newly comprehended technique to cultivate the dragon transformation art. Logically speaking, Xiao Hua's impatient appearance shouldn't be suitable for cultivation. However, this dragon transformation art had been in Xiao Hua's mind for who knows how many times. Some of the details and taboos were already clear to him, so he wasn't afraid of making any mistakes. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiao Hua only wanted to see if he could cultivate the dragon transformation art using the cultivation method of the blood shadow technique. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua began to cultivate the dragon transformation art with a perturbed mood, he discovered that the dragon transformation art wasn't an unattainable technique anymore. He could actually really control his meridians. Ha ha ha. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't continue cultivating. He knew his current agitated state of mind wasn't suitable for cultivation. Thus, he stood up and laughed heartily towards the sky. Immediately, he walked to the entrance of the cave and used his hand to push with all his might. The mountain rocks blocking the entrance were all pushed down by him in an instant. The whistling mountain wind rushed in and blew his hair high into the air. Xiao Hua's face was full of smiles. He walked to the entrance of the cave and looked at the countless vegetation in front of the mountain. There were also birds flying in the air. His heart was incomparably carefree. Only now did Xiao Hua have a feeling that he was above ordinary cultivators. Previously, it was true that his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. However, he had always been worried about the technique. Now, the mysterious Long Yu and the mysterious dragon transformation art had been controlled by him. How could he still be ordinary? Thinking to this point, Xiao Hua let out a long whistle in the air. It was as if he wanted to disperse all the gloominess of these past few years. Fellow Taoist Xiao. A familiar voice suddenly came from above his head. Chapter 1396. Fellow Taoist Kai? Xiao Hua didn't expect that there would be someone in the air. Hearing that familiar voice, he naturally raised his head. Wuxia descended from the air, looked at the cave behind Xiao Hua, then looked at Xiao Hua's cultivation. She said thoughtfully, "Fellow Taoist Xiao is indeed an almighty person. It's only been a few dozen days, and you've already firmly stepped into the early third level of qi refining. It looks like, after a few more days of hard work, I'm afraid you'll be able to rush into the middle stage." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Kai praises me too much. I'm only at the 3rd level of qi refining. Not to mention Senior Li's foundation establishment, I'm still far from fellow Daoist Kai's 5th level of qi refining. How can I compare to Senior Li? Kai Wuxia was dejected. Oh right, fellow Daoist Kai. Why are you still here? Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he asked knowingly. Kai Wuxia's face was slightly red, and she frowned. Since fellow Daoist Xiao was able to comprehend something at the moment of life and death on 1,000 Feet Peak, can't you also let I cultivate in seclusion this time? Even if I have limited aptitude and no progress, can't I cultivate in seclusion? After Kai Wuxia finished speaking, she felt that it was inappropriate, as if she was trying to hide something. Her face was crimson, and she stamped her feet, urged her magic power, and leaped into the air, about to fly far away. Fellow Daoist Kai, take care. Senior Li left something for you. Xiao Hua laughed in his heart and hurriedly shouted. Sure enough, Kai Wuxia's figure flew out several dozen feet, then suddenly stopped in the air. She hesitated for a moment, then flew back. At this time, her face had already regained its calm, and there seemed to be some expectation in her eyes. What is it? When did Senior Li give it to me? Kai Wuxia asked. A few dozen days ago, after fellow Daoist Kai left. Xiao Hua answered and took out the communication talisman. Kai Wuxia frowned slightly and used her hand to take it. She asked again, what did Senior Li say? This. Xiao Hua hesitated and said with a smile. Senior Li said that if we're fated, we can all meet in the utmost happiness faction. Xiao Hua didn't know what Li Zongbao meant. Of course, he didn't dare to say anything. He also didn't want to say anything. Li Zongbao didn't say anything, so he could only say what he said. Of course, this was also what Li Zongbao had said. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua still didn't understand the heart of a female cultivator. When Kai Wuxia heard this, a cold smile appeared on her face. In that case, fellow Daoist Xiao also has such a communication talisman? Xiao Hua was embarrassed and said in a low voice. Yes, Senior Li also bestowed this junior with one. Ha ha ha, bestowed. Kai Wuxia sneered and said, I naturally bestowed this message talisman. No. Senior Li didn't say that. Xiao Hua was very anxious, his back was sweating. He didn't say that, but he did. Kai Wuxia's face was covered in frost as she held Li Zongbao's message talisman in her hand. The expression in her eyes changed a few times before finally becoming resolute. She urged the mana in her hand and a ball of flame rose from her hand. In the blink of an eye, the message talisman was burned to ashes. Fellow Daoist Kai? Xiao Hua was shocked. He really couldn't understand Kai Wuxia's actions and said anxiously, What are you doing? Not doing anything. Senior Li is a foundation establishment senior of the utmost happiness faction. What does he have to do with us? What's the use of keeping the message talisman? Kai Wuxia's voice came from afar. Xiao Hua was completely speechless. His flying figure also stopped. At this time, it had already been dozens of days since the incident at 1,000 Feet Peak. Kai Wuxia was still cruising around here. Needless to say, she must be worried about Li Zongbao. But her performance in front of Xiao Hua. A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea. A female cultivator's heart is like the sand at the bottom of the sea. No matter how profound Senior Li's cultivation is, I'm afraid he can't figure it out. Xiao Hua shook his head with a bitter smile and turned to fly towards 1,000 Feet Peak. 1,000 Feet Peak was still the same. It didn't attract the attention of other cultivators because of the death of several hundred rogue cultivators in Tianqi. It also didn't become famous in the country of Xi because a devil dweller was killed by a foundation establishment cultivator. On the contrary, it was because Li Zongbao advanced a foundation establishment several dozen days ago, which caused some celestial phenomena and attracted the attention of some cultivators. They came to investigate, but how could those cultivators see anything? Soon after, they all dispersed. Xiao Hua came at this time, so he definitely couldn't meet other cultivators. Looking at the numerous caves on 1,000 Feet Peak, Xiao Hua simply couldn't think of going in to explore. Who knows if there are other demons inside? Oh, that's right. The stone statues in the blood-colored space. There are two of them. One is a devil dweller and the other is a devil dweller. Qing Fengmin's blood shadow and Luo Jesen's blood shadow, are they respectively these two things? But, if the two of them are, then the third cultivator to establish Heaven Forsaken. What is he? Xiao Hua suddenly thought. Also, what about Tianqi? Should I bring Qing Fengmin's matter to the rogue cultivators in Tianqi? Xiao Hua thought of another problem. Tianqi was originally an alliance of rogue cultivators. It was precisely the protection of rogue cultivators. Although the rogue cultivators in Tianqi are somewhat scheming against each other, after all, they are here in name. They can intimidate those sects and cultivator aristocratic families. Moreover, if Tianqi develops and grows stronger, it may not be impossible to contend against those sects and aristocratic families. Although Qing Fengmin's purpose in establishing Tianqi is sinister, the results are positive. Many rogue cultivators have benefited from it. If I tell Qing Fengmin's matter, Tianqi, won't it disband? And won't the rogue cultivators in Tianqi fall into a situation where they have no one to rely on? Alas, forget it. It's already been several dozen days. Maybe Wuxia has already spread the news here. Tianqi has also disbanded long ago. Besides, there's still Li Zongbao. He's a cultivator of Lian Country's Extreme Happiness School. This kind of matter of killing a devil, it's bound to spread. Even if I don't say it, Tianqi would have already disbanded by now. Forget it. Now that I've also obtained a fire attribute cultivation method, I'll be able to cultivate to the 5th level of Qi refining. At that time, I'll have magic power and flying speed. Qi refining stage cultivators, who would I be afraid of? As for Tianqi, it has nothing to do with me. Xiao Hua thought of Ma Qingqing and the others and couldn't help but feel somewhat dejected. They were all wholeheartedly working for the rogue cultivators, but they had instead fallen into a tragic end. Oh, I forgot. These several dozen days, I've been cultivating cultivation methods. I still haven't carefully looked at the storage bag I got from Qing Fengmin's blood shadow. Xiao Hua scratched his head. He had obtained so many things for no reason that he didn't even have the time to carefully look through them. Looking through his gains was Xiao Hua's favorite thing to do. Inside Qing Fengmin's storage bag, there were a lot of things, and they were also a mess. Apart from a few jade bottles, there were some things of unknown origin. The cultivation methods that Xiao Hua had high hopes for before were not even a single book. Oh, how could I forget again? Qing Fengmin is a devil. Why would he want medicinal pills and cultivation methods? Even if there were cultivation methods, he wouldn't carry them with him. Presumably, he left them in Jianghu City or somewhere else. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. But Tianqi has so many cultivation methods, don't they all have to rely on Qing Fengmin to coordinate them? Where would he put the cultivation methods? What a pity, this guy was completely absorbed by my devil spear point, not leaving behind a single trace. If I had known earlier, I would have asked him at that time. But what's the use of regretting now? Xiao Hua curled his lips and threw all the things inside the storage bag into the space. Just like before, he placed them in categories. There are also 2 gold foil here. Xiao Hua placed the 2 gold foil together with the 2 gold foil he had obtained before. These 4 gold foil looked exactly the same, and there were some strange patterns on them. But as for what they were used for, he still had no idea. Apart from this gold foil, among the remaining things, Xiao Hua only recognized a tiger head waist token. Because when he was organizing things, there was also a waist token with a bunch of bamboo drawn on it together with this waist token. Because he wanted to split it equally with Wuxia, Xiao Hua kept the tiger head waist token for himself and gave the bamboo one to Wuxia. However, even if he recognized it, Xiao Hua still didn't know what it was used for. Of course, this was enough. After all, the remaining things were strange, and he simply couldn't see the original appearance of these things. Forget it, let's look at the jade bottles. Xiao Hua took out the jade bottle. As soon as he opened the jade bottle, he was stupefied. Hee, I thought I was drawing water with a bamboo basket for nothing. So the good stuff was actually hidden here. Inside these several jade bottles were all foundation establishment pills. Xiao Hua roughly counted, and estimated that there were about 30 pills. I'm rich. Xiao Hua was very excited. He rubbed his hands and put the foundation establishment pills into his space, sweeping away his somewhat depressed mood. With these foundation establishment pills, presumably when he cultivated to the peak of the 12th level of the Qi refining realm, he should be able to easily step into the foundation establishment realm. That being said, Xiaohua had only just reached the 3rd level of the Qi refining realm. The distance from the 12th level of the Qi refining realm was still very far. Who knew when he would be able to reach the peak of the Qi refining realm? But, with these foundation establishment pills, Wuxia's chances of stepping into the foundation establishment realm are also very high. Xiaohua naturally thought of the storage pouch that was given to Wuxia. Forget it, those foundation establishment pills are already hers. In the future, I don't know if I'll be able to see this eccentric girl again. Why would I think about it? Xiaohua turned his head and looked at the Thousand-Zhang Peak not far away. He leaped up and flew into the distance. However, just after flying for a moment, before he could fly out of the Thousand-Zhang Peak's range, Wuxia intercepted him in midair. Looking at Wuxia, who was flying over from afar, Xiaohua secretly laughed. You still say you don't care about Li Zongbao. I just came over from the Thousand-Zhang Peak, and you're already here to inquire about him? But contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, Wuxia didn't mention Li Zongbao's matter to him at all. Instead, she cupped her hands and asked, Fellow Taoist Xiao, the trip to the Thousand-Zhang Peak was out of my expectations. Not only did I not repay fellow Taoist's kindness, I even almost implicated fellow Taoist. This really makes I blush with shame. I want to find another opportunity to make up for it. I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested? Chapter 1397. Hearing Wuxia's words, Xiaohua's first reaction was to shake his head. Nonsense, he had a 5th-level Qi refining cultivation method, medicinal pills, and the mysterious dragon transformation art to cultivate. For the time being, he didn't need to worry about cultivation methods. Instead of taking risks, he might as well find a place to cultivate. Maybe he could reach the 5th level of Qi refining in a few years. Oh, fellow Xiao doesn't need to be in a hurry to answer. Wait until I finish explaining the whole story, then you can decide. Wuxia seemed to understand Xiaohua's thoughts and said with a smile, This. Xiaohua hesitated, but he quickly cupped his hands and said, Then, I am all ears. Actually, the matter is very simple. Wuxia said with a smile. I wonder if fellow Xiao has heard of the revolving reflection pill. Revolving reflection pill? Xiaohua stared blankly and rolled his eyes. He had only told Li Zongbao and Wuxia about Yunqi Marsh, but he hadn't mentioned the rainbow epiphyllum. So he asked, What kind of medicinal pill is that? Wuxia didn't doubt that Xiaohua didn't know about it. So she explained the effects of the revolving reflection pill, then said, Unfortunately, this revolving reflection pill is only effective for cultivators at the 12th level of Qi refining. Speaking up to here, her eyes flashed with a strange light, then she restored her calm. It's useless for low-level Qi refining cultivators like me. Fellow Kai, what do you mean by this? Xiaohua was a bit confused. The revolving reflection pill's main ingredient is the rainbow epiphyllum, which fellow Xiao has been to Yunqi Marsh before. However, the rainbow epiphyllum generally appears after the rain. Normally, it is hidden in the marsh and is extremely difficult to find. Moreover, the rainbow epiphyllum is guarded by a spirit butterfly called the water pattern butterfly. If you aren't at least at the 6th or 7th level of Qi refining, I'm afraid it will be difficult to pick. Actually, what I want to talk about is another medicinal pill that is equally famous as the revolving reflection pill. It's called the embryonic breathing pill. Wuxia finally said the main point. Embryonic breathing pill? Xiaohua furrowed his brows. He did obtain some pill recipes and alchemy manuals, but recently, he only focused on cultivating his cultivation technique. He didn't look at the pill recipes and alchemy manuals, so he didn't know what this embryonic breathing pill was. The revolving illumination pill and the embryonic breath pill are spirit pills that can be used by Qi condensation cultivators. The revolving illumination pill is used by Qi condensation cultivators to help them condense their divine sense. As for the embryonic breath pill, it can be used by all Qi condensation cultivators. Its effect is to help a cultivator break through a bottleneck. Of course, this pill is only effective once, and the success rate is 50%. Only 50%. Xiaohua exclaimed. I thought I could break through after taking it. There's no such thing as absolute certainty in this world. Wuxia seemed to have thought of something, and her expression became a little gloomy. She smiled bitterly and said, even if you use pills to increase your cultivation, it's not something that can be done overnight. A pill can only be effective for a certain stage, and the more you use it, the worse the effect. This embryonic breath pill can help a cultivator break through a bottleneck, especially for qi condensation cultivators. Even if the success rate is only 50%, it's still very precious. Then, where is the main ingredient of the embryonic breath pill? Is it also in Yunxi Marsh? Xiaohua's heart slightly moved, and he asked, do you know of the Inkzhao Black Forest? Wuxia asked calmly. Inkzhao Black Forest? Xiaohua immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. I've heard that Tianqi has been to this place before, and many people have died there. I's cultivation is shallow, so I definitely won't go there. Hee, fellow Xiao, don't worry. I was just asking if you know of the Inkzhao Black Forest, and I didn't say I wanted to go there. Wuxia smiled, looked at the Thousand-Zhang Peak in the distance, and said, the Inkzhao Black Forest is a place that only qi condensation cultivators of the 7th stage and above can go. With my current cultivation, going there will only be suicide. I want to invite fellow Xiao to go to a place similar to the Inkzhao Black Forest, but the degree of danger is much lower. Fellow Kai, please tell me. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Last time I met fellow Xiao, there is a place 1,000 miles to the west called the Sobbing Meng Mountain Range. This mountain range is infested with spirit beasts, and there are countless dangers inside. However, according to what this poor Taoist knows, there is a kind of spirit fruit growing in an extremely secretive forest on the outskirts of the Weimeng Mountain Range. It is called the mother-child spirit fruit, and it is the main ingredient used to concoct the embryonic breathing pill. Fellow Kai, do you mean to invite I to go to the Sobbing Meng Mountain Range with you? Xiaohua said thoughtfully. Fellow Xiao, what I said is exactly what I was thinking. Wuxia nodded and said, fellow Zhao's flying speed is very fast, and you also have strength and magical power that I don't have. If I don't invite fellow Xiao, who else can I invite? Xiaohua frowned and pondered. Fellow Xiao, think about it carefully. There are 12 layers of qi refining, and every layer has a bottleneck. If you have this embryonic breath pill, you have a 50% chance of breaking through this bottleneck. This kind of opportunity can only be encountered by chance. I just found a clue from the things that fellow Xiao gave I reckon that some loose cultivator got it from Tianqi. I can't guarantee that other loose cultivators don't know about it. After pondering for a moment, Xiaohua still shook his head, cupped his hands and said, fellow Kai, please know that I's cultivation is not enough. I really don't dare to take the risk. Fellow Kai, please find someone else. Wuxia sighed and said, alas, other than fellow Taoist Xiao, who else can this poor Taoist feel at ease? Xiaohua secretly criticized, but he couldn't say it out loud. He could only smile bitterly and said, I really don't want to go. Even if fellow Taoist picks the mother-child spirit fruit, how will you refine the embryonic breath pill? Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to worry about this. If fellow Taoist Xiao wants to go, just the two of us won't be enough. I still need to invite someone else. Wuxia patiently explained. There's still someone else? Xiaohua shook his head even more. Right now, he had cultivation methods, medicinal pills, and alchemy techniques. He needed to cultivate calmly and didn't want to take the risk. How about this? Fellow Taoist Xiao, give one of your messaging talismans to I need some time to find someone. When the time comes, I will send a message to you. If you change your mind, you can come find me. Wuxia didn't force him and suggested. And that's for the best. Xiaohua gave one of his messaging talismans to Wuxia. Right, fellow Taoist Xiao, are you still going to cultivate in seclusion here? Wuxia looked around and asked. Of course not here. Xiaohua shook his head and said, this place is too close to Thousand-Zhang Peak. I don't feel at ease. I want to return to Jianghu City, find an inn to stay in, and slowly cultivate. Xianxia laughed out loud and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's idea is very fresh. Let's not talk about the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the inns in Jianghu City. Even if you have to pay people spirit stones every day, it's not advisable." Then, fellow Taoist Kai, do you have any good suggestions? Xiaohua scratched his head and said, "Is there even a need to say it? Find a place with abundant heaven and earth spiritual qi and build your own cave? If you want to live there for a long time, then make it a bit more tidy. If you want to cultivate for a short time, then make it a bit simpler. Oh, there's a rare spirit-seeking mouse that's a specialty of the Sobbing Meng mountain range. It's the most sensitive to heaven and earth spiritual qi. If fellow Taoist Xiao can obtain one, then you can easily find a place with abundant heaven and earth spiritual qi in the boundless mountains and open up your cave." "I don't dare to think so much." Xiaohua waved his hand, looked into the distance, and said with a smile, "I only need a cave to settle down in." Wuxia turned her head to look, then pointed with her finger and said, 200 miles south from here, there's a tall mountain that's similar to the Thousand Zhang Peak. I passed by when I came to the Thousand Zhang Peak some time ago. There's an abandoned cave there. It should be a certain senior who doesn't use it. If fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't mind, then you can go take a look. When I find people, I'll go look for you." "And that's fine. I'll do as fellow Taoist Kai says." Xiaohua cupped his hands and thanked her. After Wuxia cupped her hands and said goodbye, Xiaohua also flew south. Sure enough, he saw a tall mountain about 200 miles away. That abandoned cave was actually hidden. Xiaohua searched for a long time before he saw the entrance that was only half a person's height and was blocked by a mountain tree. After he entered, he discovered that there was indeed another cave inside. This abandoned cave was quite large. Inside, there were several caves that were connected. Each cave had been cleaned and looked very decent. Among these caves, except for one that had a shabby praying mat, which Xiaohua knew was the place for closed-door cultivation, there was also a cave that had wild weeds and a few common spirit herbs, which was where medicinal herbs were planted. As for the other caves, he didn't know what they were used for. No wonder it's called a cave. Sure enough, it's different from ordinary caves. Xiaohua looked at the caves again and secretly nodded his head. Then, just like before, he used a boulder to block the entrance and exit of the cave. He sat cross-legged on the praying mat and began his closed-door cultivation. What Xiaohua was currently cultivating was the fire attribute cultivation method, raising fire to burning the heavens. This was a basic cultivation method. When cultivating this cultivation method, Xiaohua's mind was still in the space. On one hand, he was comprehending the heavenly Tao. On the other hand, he was drawing spiritual qi into his body. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth circulated in the meridians of the third level of qi, refining his true qi and strengthening his cultivation. In addition to this, Xiaohua also wanted to cultivate the dragon transformation art. The cultivation of the dragon transformation art was different from the cultivation of basic cultivation methods. The dragon transformation art borrowed the cultivation technique of blood shadow art and cultivated it in Xiaohua's meridians. In truth, it was the cultivation of the meridians themselves. What made Xiaohua ecstatic was that although the blood shadow art was an extremely sinister cultivation method of the devil realm, it was also extremely wonderful and had its own unique effect. Xiaohua only needed to activate the dragon transformation art, and the meridians in his body really began to cultivate automatically as if they had a life of their own. He didn't need to worry too much about it. Moreover, cultivating the dragon transformation art in his meridians didn't have any conflict with refining his true qi in his meridians. Thus, Xiaohua settled down in this abandoned immortal's cave. As time passed day by day, Xiaohua's cultivation speed finally caught up with ordinary cultivators. His cultivation also increased little by little. Chapter 1398. Time passed extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, Xiaohua had been in seclusion for more than half a year in this abandoned cave. In this half year, Xiaohua cultivated day and night. In addition to the basic cultivation methods, the dragon transformation art, and so on, he also cultivated some of the basic magic techniques. He even read a lot of the book he obtained from the Zhu family. It could be said that he had a direct impression of the Dawn Rain continent. As for Xiaohua's cultivation, in this half-year, he had steadily advanced from the early third level of qi refining to the middle third level of qi refining. Although this kind of advancement was very common for ordinary cultivators with sex, for Xiaohua, it was an enormous breakthrough. However, after reaching the middle third level of qi refining, Xiaohua had no choice but to come out of seclusion. The reason was very simple. The medicinal pills in his space were gone. Since Xiaohua began his seclusion, because he had a fire attribute cultivation method suitable for his cultivation progress seemed to be faster than before. Therefore, when he cultivated, the medicinal pills he took weren't as extravagant as before. He only took one out when necessary. However, his medicinal pills were still limited. In half a year's time, the marrow cleansing pills and clear ripple pills in his space were all consumed by him. There were only a few dozen foundation establishment pills left. After stopping taking medicinal pills, Xiaohua felt that his cultivation had begun to progress at a tortoise's speed. Xiaohua, who had already adapted to taking medicinal pills and cultivating at the same speed as ordinary cultivators, was somewhat dissatisfied. Speaking of medicinal pills, he could still refine them. Xiaohua had the alchemy technique, the alchemy furnace, and the spiritual herbs in his space. Refining medicinal pills shouldn't be a problem, right? This was what Xiaohua had planned to do half a year ago. However, when he truly began to refine medicinal pills, he discovered that he had a huge omission, and that was the earth fire used to refine medicinal pills. Refining ordinary medicinal pills, such as the parasol pill, blood replenishing pill, and so on, didn't require earth fire. It was possible to use some fire talismans to refine them successfully. However, marrow cleansing pill, clear ripple pill, and other medicinal pills that could increase one's cultivation needed earth fire. Moreover, the alchemy furnace that Xiaohua obtained was so big. The saltpeter and 3 yang talismans that Xiaohua purchased weren't enough to warm the alchemy furnace, let alone refine medicinal pills. Of course, after Xiaohua discovered this problem, he was extremely depressed, but at the same time, he didn't stop studying alchemy, as well as understanding this alchemical furnace. Fortunately, he was able to find the method to refine this alchemy furnace on the inner wall of the alchemy furnace. Moreover, he also knew the name of this alchemy furnace and the general method to use it. This cauldron was called the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern cauldron. The little bird on top of the cauldron looked like a vermilion bird, and the 5 openings around the cauldron were arranged according to the 5 elements. This 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace could refine high-level pills, but the prerequisite was that the furnace had to be refined first. Otherwise, it could only refine low-level pills. As for this low-level pill, it wasn't the low-level pill that Xiaohua had in mind. Although the introduction didn't go into detail, it did mention a high-level pill, the nascent soul pill. That was used by nascent soul stage cultivators. Then what was this low-level pill? Was there still a need to explain? This discovery also made Xiaohua's extremely depressed mood slightly better. After all, he had obtained a high-level item. Yes, although his cultivation was still very shallow now, and his spiritual power was a little bit short of the requirement to refine this alchemy furnace, the alchemy furnace was in his own space. Even if he didn't refine it, he couldn't refine pills. Others couldn't even see it, so it couldn't be said to be snatched by others. In addition to the basic cultivation method, the dragon transformation art that Xiaohua practiced seemed to have some progress. Why did he say it seemed? Because the dragon transformation art was used by the meridians to transform into dragons. Xiaohua hadn't found the key to it yet. He only felt that the dragon transformation art could be used, and there were no abnormalities in his meridians. As for where the progress of half a year of cultivation was, Xiaohua didn't know. Perhaps it was because the time was too short. Xiaohua stood up and walked away. Looking at the very tidy cave, he smiled and said to himself, "This cave is really not bad. I wonder which senior left it behind." Of course, it would be best if he left behind a cultivation method or something like that. However, according to what Wuxia said, this cave, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, isn't very abundant. It's also not an excellent place for cultivation. My cultivation speed is like a tortoise. I'm afraid it has something to do with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It seems, if I really want to find a place to cultivate for a long time, I should find a place with abundant spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Yes, in addition, it's best if there's earth fire. Soon after, Xiaohua pushed away the boulder blocking the cave and walked under the sunlight. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes to enjoy the warmth of the sunlight for a while. Xiaohua then opened his eyes and looked at the clear blue sky. He secretly said, "It's already been more than half a year. This Wuxia, why hasn't she sent me a message talisman? Could it be that she has already given up? Or the other person hasn't been found? Yes, who is that person?" Listening to what she said, it should be related to alchemy. Thinking that it was related to alchemy, Xiaohua's heart suddenly stirred. If I can go with them, maybe I can get some information from that cultivator. Even if it's some information about earth fires, it would also be good, right? Previously, when Wuxia invited Xiaohua, he didn't want to go no matter what and only wanted to build a cart behind closed doors. Now, they didn't come looking for him, but he was thinking about it himself. However, it was already half a year later, and Wuxia still hadn't sent a message. If there were no accidents, she must have already gone. Xiaohua pondered for a moment and sighed slightly. After basking in the sun for a while, he also returned to the cave. The problem of medicinal pills must be solved. Clear breeze pills are suitable for third-layer qi refining cultivators. I must go to the exchange market and exchange for some. Xiaohua sat cross-legged on the shabby praying mat and pondered. However, there really aren't many medicinal pills that can increase cultivation. I can only get them by bidding in the exchange market. Others can see the effect with just 1 or 2 pills, but I have to use dozens of pills. The exchange market is not a good place to go. I still have to think more about alchemy. Xiaohua himself also knew that being able to buy a large amount of marrow cleansing pills and clear breeze pills from the Feng clan's exchange market was a lucky thing. He couldn't always come across them, so he could only place his hopes on alchemy. In the space behind his head, there were actually many spiritual plants. At this time, they were all several hundred years old, and some were even close to 1,000 years old. However, even if he had these spiritual plants, he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to exchange them for a suitable amount of medicinal pills. Moreover, if these scarce spiritual plants attracted disaster, wouldn't it be even more unprofitable? I forgot. The spiritual plants in my space are all very old. If I need to exchange them for spirit stones or do some other things, it really won't be easy to take them out. I still have to plan ahead. Xiaohua previously only wanted to use these spiritual plants for alchemy. He simply didn't think about exchanging them. Therefore, the spiritual plants in his space grew without being picked. Now that he thought about it, it was still somewhat inappropriate. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he picked some of each spiritual plant. After a period of time, he would pick some more. This way, he would have spiritual plants of all ages, and it would be convenient to exchange them. What is this thing? When Xiaohua was sorting out and picking the spiritual plants, he naturally had to look at the rainbow cloud that had already been transplanted into the space. That ugly rainbow cloud was no longer as weak and small as before. It seemed to be overflowing with vitality. Moreover, the rainbow on top of the sphere had also become a lot bigger. The most peculiar thing was that the surface of the rainbow cloud was gradually revealing some strange runes. Those runes were faintly discernible and weren't particularly clear. As for what surprised Xiaohua, he discovered that on the stem of the rainbow cloud, there were actually 2 thumb-sized insect eggs. Where did these insect eggs come from? Xiaohua frowned as he tried to recall, but very quickly, Xiaohua understood that this egg must have been brought in with him when he transplanted the rainbow epiphyllum from Yunqi Marsh. Moreover, it must have been laid by the water-pattern butterfly that had attacked him. No wonder when I walked so close, the water-pattern butterfly didn't attack. It seems that it was laying eggs. Moreover, when I took away the rainbow cloud, the water-pattern butterfly's crazy attack was also for these insect eggs. I was careless and actually caused its home to be destroyed. Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh and cry. Forget it. Even if I go to Yunqi Marsh now, where will I find the mother of these 2 insect eggs? I can only treat them well and raise them as butterflies. Xiaohua secretly comforted himself. But at this moment, he suddenly thought of something and was dumbstruck for a moment. Of course, it was precisely this question that lit up his mind like lightning. My space. How can I put living things in it? Xiaohua was completely dizzy. At this moment, he He also remembered that when he put the Iceworm King's egg into the space in Nankai Ping, he already faintly felt that something was wrong. This was because although the Iceworm King's egg was damaged, it still had vitality and couldn't be casually placed in a storage bag. It was just that the situation that day was urgent, so he didn't think too much about it. Now that he thought about it, how did the space in his mind become a storage bag? But then, Xiaohua didn't understand. The storage bag was specially used to store spirit beasts, such as Fei Qing from the spirit husbandry sect. Anything that wasn't a spirit beast couldn't be placed in it. In other words, things that could be placed in the storage bag couldn't be placed in the storage bag, and things that could be placed in the storage bag couldn't be placed in the storage bag. But, why did this rule change when it came to me? Xiaohua was stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Indeed, he didn't have much to think about. He didn't know the origin of this space at the back of his mind at all, so all kinds of strange things were normal. Another few days passed, and Xiaohua's cultivation still didn't make much progress. He had no choice but to leave the cave abode again and prepare to make a trip to Jianghu City's E-City to try his luck and see if he could exchange for a clear breeze pill. Just as he flew into the air, there was a change in his mind. Didn't Wuxia leave me a message talisman? She didn't come to find me, so why can't I go find her? As he thought, he took out the summoning talisman and urged it with his transcendence energy. The summoning talisman flew into the air. However, the summoning talisman didn't fly too far. It only flew a few li to Xiaohua's left before stopping. Chapter 1399. In less time than it took to eat a meal, Wuxia flew over. Seeing Xiaohua's flabbergasted expression, Wuxia giggled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, could it be that you're the only one allowed to advance to the middle stage of the third layer of the aura refining realm, but I can't also enter closed-door cultivation?" Xiaohua looked at Wuxia's peak fifth layer of the aura refining realm and said with a bitter smile, cough, I only thought fellow Taoist had already gone to the Sobbing Mountain range. I simply didn't expect fellow Taoist to be nearby. Could it be that fellow Taoist already picked some mother-child spirit fruit? What does fellow Taoist Xiao think? Wuxia didn't answer and instead asked a question. This. Xiaohua slightly frowned, but he immediately smiled and said, "If fellow Taoist Kai went to the Sobbing Mountain range, presumably you would have greeted I. Since I didn't receive any message from fellow Taoist Kai, presumably you still haven't gone to the Sobbing Mountain range, right?" Wuxia clapped her hands and said, "Worthy of being the fellow Taoist I think highly of. Fellow Taoist Xiao, fellow Taoist actually believes in I so much, this really makes I gratified." How could Xiaohua think so much? It was just that he saw Wuxia's cultivation increase, and inside his jade bottle was a foundation building pill. He reckoned Wuxia's jade bottle was about the same, so he casually asked. Just as Xiaohua smiled and wanted to say something, he suddenly froze and said involuntarily, "Fellow Taoist Kai, could it be you took a foundation building pill?" Hearing this, Wuxia slightly sighed. She neither nodded nor shook her head. She only raised her eyes to look at the clouds in the distance. After a long while she said, "I wanted to take it, but I know my cultivation level is too low. The medicinal power of this foundation building pill is far from what a fifth layer of the aura refining realm can bear." "Oh," Xiaohua nodded, but Wuxia immediately said, "I can only take 20% of a foundation building pill." 20%? Xiaohua said involuntarily, "Fellow Taoist Kai still took it in the end. What will happen when you build your foundation in the future?" "Foundation?" Wuxia said self-mockingly, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, how confident you are that you can cultivate I to build foundation." Xiaohua shook his head slightly. This cultivation level was truly far away, so how could he know? 10%. Wuxia raised a finger and said without hesitation, "My Kai family's cultivation method only goes up to the 10th layer of qi refining. I have only cultivated up to the 5th layer, and I have been stuck at the 5th layer for many years. If I can't break through in a few more years, then I will only be able to cultivate up to the 8th layer of qi refining. Furthermore, even if I were to reach the 10th layer of qi refining, I would still be unable to reach the 12th layer of qi refining by relying solely on the techniques of the Kai clan. Foundation establishment is nothing but a pipe dream." Rather than that, I might as well use the foundation establishment pill to increase my cultivation. Xianxia said in disappointment. I believe that fellow Taoist Xiao also understands I's urgency to obtain the embryonic breathing pill, right? Xiao Hua was speechless and could only nod slightly. Compared to Xianxia, he was even more pitiful. Up until now, he only had a low-level cultivation method that could allow him to cultivate up to the 5th layer of qi refining. If Xianxia only had a 10% chance of reaching foundation establishment, then he himself didn't even have a 5% chance. No matter what, ever since I met fellow Taoist Xiao, I's good luck has been unceasing. Not only did I obtain the keepsake of Old Man Thousandjiang, I also escaped death on Thousandjiang Peak and obtained some foundation establishment pills. Presumably, with fellow Taoist Zhao's company, that mother-child spirit fruit will also be easy to obtain. In the future, when I reach foundation establishment, I will also have a lot more confidence. Xianxia said with a smile. With fellow Taoist Kai's auspicious words, I also hope that everything will go smoothly and I will reach foundation establishment as soon as possible. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said with a smile. All right, since fellow Taoist Xiao has come out of seclusion, then, let's go to Sobbing Meng Mountains together according to what we agreed on half a year ago? Xianxia stared with her big eyes, looking forward to Xiao Hua's answer. I will listen to fellow Taoist Kai's arrangement. Xianxia was overjoyed and said with a smile, with fellow Taoist Zhao's help, this alphabet spirit fruit will certainly be easy to obtain. Immediately, under Xianxia's lead, the two of them flew towards the northwest. On the way, Xiao Hua very casually asked about the other person that Xianxia wanted to invite. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, that person wasn't an alchemist like Xiao Hua had imagined. Instead, he was the same as Xianxia, a disciple of a cultivator family. His name was Yan Liwei. Seeing Xiao Hua's very strange expression, Xianxia finally told him the reason. As it turned out, although this Yan Liwei's cultivation was only at the 7th layer of the qi refining realm, he was the nephew of a foundation establishment alchemist from Xuanyan School. Xianxia wanted to use Yan Liwei's relationship to ask that alchemist from Xuanyan School to refine embryonic breathing pills for her. So that's how it is. After he understood, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He didn't think that nepotism was so important in the cultivation world. It seemed that his idea of learning alchemy was going to fall through. After several days of continuous travel, they arrived at a place with beautiful mountains and limpid waters. A large village appeared in front of the two of them. This is the Yen clan. Xianxia pointed at the continuous village and said, this is where the clansmen of the Yen clan who don't cultivate live. Their disciples who truly cultivate are all in the valley behind the village. It's said that the valley has a formation set up by a gold core senior. Ordinary people can't casually enter. After flying close to the village, Xianxia landed on the ground. There were already several young people who looked very capable coming up to greet her. Seeing that Xianxia was a female cultivator, a girl around 20 years old stepped out from the crowd and said in a soft and clear voice, I am Yan Feng. Greetings to the female immortal. May I know why the female immortal has come to visit my Yen clan? Xianxia nodded slightly and said, I am a disciple of Luyang's Kai clan. Previously, I sent a letter to your honorable senior martial brother Yan Liwei. Now I've come as promised. So you're looking for martial uncle Yan. The girl Yan Feng looked at Xianxia several times and then looked at Xiao Hua. She smiled and said, Martial uncle Kai, please follow disciple to the village and wait for a moment. Disciple will immediately send someone to invite martial uncle Yan. Thank you for your trouble. Xianxia nodded slightly and then saw the two young disciples quickly walk into the village. Yan Feng accompanied Xianxia as they slowly walked forward. When they arrived at the small pavilion in front of the village, Yan Feng took out some spirit fruits for Xianxia and Xiao Hua to enjoy. She and the other disciples accompanied them. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, a slightly frivolous voice sounded. Io, fellow Taoist Kai, I received your message and have been thinking about you day and night. I've always been looking forward to your arrival. Who would have thought that you would delay for half a year? Xiao Hua didn't turn around and frowned slightly. He thought to himself, this guy. Is he a cultivator? But when he looked at Xianxia, He didn't see anything strange on her face. Presumably, she didn't find this strange. He stood up from his chair and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yen, I had some mundane matters to attend to and was delayed. Sorry for making you wait." Xiaohua also stood up and turned around to look. It was a cultivator dressed like a young master. He was holding something that looked like a folding fan in his hand and was swaying as he walked over. This cultivator's eyebrows were raised, his pair of peach blossom eyes were slightly narrowed, and his nose was tall. He looked very handsome. "This fellow Taoist is?" Yanli didn't return the greeting. His left hand lightly waved the folding fan and his peach blossom eyes looked at Xiaohua strangely as he asked Wuxia, "He, fellow Taoist Yen, this is fellow Taoist Xiaohua. I invited him to help." Wuxia didn't reveal Xiaohua's background and vaguely said, "Help? With his cultivation?" Yanli curled his lips and said without any trace of politeness, "My Yen clan has plenty of disciples like him. If you want to help, I can grab a bunch of them. Why would I need him?" Fellow Taoist Kai, are you not at ease with I? Wuxia quickly waved her hand and said, "Fellow Taoist Yen is a disciple of a famous clan. How can I not believe you? It's just that I owe fellow Taoist Xiao a favor. I have no choice but to invite him. Consider it as returning the favor." "Greetings, fellow Taoist Yen." Xiaohua understood and cupped his hands in greeting. "Fellow Taoist?" Yanli snorted from his nose and sat next to the two. He said, "You're only at the 3rd level of qi refining. If you were in my Yen clan, you should call me martial uncle. Even if you're outside my Yen clan, you should still call me senior." "Fellow Taoist Yen." Wuxia was afraid Xiaohua would get angry, so she quickly smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, our friendship is shallow. I hope fellow Taoist Yen can forgive me for calling you fellow Taoist." That's fellow Taoist Kai's friendship with him. What does it have to do with I? Yanli picked up a spiritual fruit from the stone table and put it in his mouth. He said non-committally. Wuxia smiled bitterly and gave Xiaohua a meaningful look. It seemed she didn't want to make things difficult for Xiaohua. Xiaohua sneered in his heart. He was very clear in his heart. If Li Zongbao from the Utmost Happiness faction saw this situation, wouldn't he have already beaten this guy black and blue? "I'm just asking for some embryonic breathing pill. There's no need to give Yanli any face." Just as Xiaohua frowned and was about to speak, Yanli opened his mouth again. He flipped his folding fan and pretended to be magnanimous. Forget it. I am also a disciple of a cultivation family. How can I lower myself to the same level as you, a little rogue cultivator?" Wuxia didn't explain Xiaohua's background, but Yanli Wei seemed to understand. Then he said to Wuxia, "Half a year ago, fellow Taoist Kai told this poor Taoist about this matter. This poor Taoist has already considered it. If we go together, fellow Taoist Kai will have to give this poor Taoist 70% of the pills." "What? 70%? Wuxia didn't wait for Yanli Wei to finish speaking and said in surprise, "Didn't I say 50%? At that time, didn't fellow Taoist Yen also not object?" Yanli Wei seemed to have already expected Wuxia's surprise. He didn't panic at all. He lightly waved his folding fan and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Kai, think about it. You just told me the whereabouts of that thing, and I still have to accompany you. I also have to take the risk to pick it." Chapter 1400. Wuxia's face was slightly red, but she wasn't angry at all. She looked at Xiaohua helplessly, then turned around and said with a smile, "I originally wanted to give 20% to fellow Taoist Xiao, but fellow Taoist Yan's method of distribution, how can I deal with myself?" "Haha, isn't this good? Fellow Taoist Kai and I are of one mind. Isn't this 30% exactly what fellow Taoist Kai wants?" Yan Liwei laughed and pointed his fan at Xiaohua. "This guy is a burden, why are you bringing him along? Even if you want to return his favor, you can just give him 1 or 2 pills later. Besides, with his cultivation, there's no reason to waste pills." Xiaohua's expression changed, and Wuxia hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Yen, you can say that, but Isn't fellow Taoist Yen taking a bit too much? I put in the most effort, so I naturally take more. If fellow Taoist Kai isn't willing, we can go our separate ways. Yen Liwei said without hesitation, as if he knew Kai Wuxia wouldn't leave in a huff. Sure enough, Kai Wuxia clenched her teeth, pondered for a moment, and said to Xiao Hua with a bitter smile, Fellow Taoist Xiao, it seems I can't fulfill what I promised you before. If fellow Taoist thinks it's not worth it, it's not too late to withdraw now. Kai Wuxia didn't tell Xiao Hua about the split before, but the information about the mother-child spirit fruit was obtained from the things Xiao Hua gave her. Since she didn't say anything, it should be the two of them splitting it equally. Now, Kai Wuxia was willing to split it equally with him. It was only about 10% of the Dan, but it was still far from what he thought before. But Xiao Hua looked at Kai Wuxia's appearance, then looked at Yen Liwei, and his heart was clear. Kai Wuxia pulled him, first, to return his favor, second, to pull him in as a helper. What she had to resist was precisely this Yen Liwei. If he withdrew, Kai Wuxia would be in an absolute disadvantage. But if she didn't find Yen Liwei, how could she find an alchemist who could refine pills? Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, I's cultivation is shallow, I'm afraid 1 or 2 pills will be enough. If fellow Taoist Kai doesn't mind, I'm still willing to take a trip. Kai Wuxia's face was filled with joy, and her eyes were filled with gratitude. She smiled and said, Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao, for helping me. Help? Li Yanwei sneered. I am the one helping. Forget it, forget it. It's between the two of you. It has nothing to do with I. Yen Liwei stood up and said, If fellow Taoist Kai doesn't object to I's suggestion, let's make a vow. All right, I'll listen to fellow Taoist Yan's arrangements. Kai Wuxia nodded deeply. Thus, the two of them clapped their hands and made an oath. Shortly after they said sternly, Fellow Taoist Kai, please wait for a moment. I's things will follow you immediately. Yen Wei left for the time it took to finish a meal before he returned with a storage pouch hanging from his waist. He smiled and said, Let's go, fellow Taoist Kai. Let's go quickly and return quickly. My martial uncle Yen might come to the Yen clan in a month or so. If we can take advantage of that time to find him, I'm afraid we have a 70% chance of success. Kai Wuxia beamed with joy and said with a smile, That's great. That place. We should be able to return within a month or so. Return within a month or so. Yen Liwei's eyes turned a few times before he smiled and said, I'll have to ask fellow Taoist Kai to lead the way. Soon after, the three of them flew into the air. Kai Wuxia accompanied Yen Liwei and led the way. Xiao Hua silently followed behind them, secretly putting some distance between them. Ha! This Xiao Hua actually has some real skills. A third-layer aura refining cultivator can actually catch up with a fifth-layer aura refining cultivator. Yen Liwei was originally disdainful of Xiao Hua, but when he saw that Xiao Hua's flying speed wasn't slow, he couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Although he wanted to test it out, Kai Wuxia didn't fly fast at all. Yen Liwei pondered for a moment and eventually gave up. After flying like this for several days, Xiao Hua faintly felt that something was wrong because the direction they were flying in seemed to be different from the direction Kai Wuxia told Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua couldn't distinguish the specific direction, he had a general idea. Sure enough, after another day, when Kai Wuxia suddenly changed direction and flew in another direction, Yen Liwei's expression slightly changed. He asked with extreme displeasure, Fellow Taoist Kai, what do you mean by this? Could it be that you don't trust one? Of course not. In this country of Shi, if I can't even trust fellow Taoist Yen, who else can? Kai Wuxia said with a smile, However, this trip is really important to I, so I have no choice but to be a bit more cautious. TSK. Isn't it just embryonic breathing pills? My martial uncle Yen has plenty of them. Who would be greedy for your few? Yen Liwei said disdainfully. Kai Wuxia smiled but didn't say anything. The three of them flew for an entire day. When the sky gradually darkened, they found a cave where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was slightly denser. Each of them took a cave and prepared to adjust their breathing and rest. Yen Liwei was different from the previous few days. He patted his storage pouch and took out several yellow talismans from within. Urging his transcendence energy, The yellow talismans all turned into green and lustrous balls of light and sank into various parts of the cave. Then, he made a few more at the entrance of the cave. Finally, he took a slightly larger yellow talisman and steadily entered the cave. Looking at Yan Li Wei's somewhat strange behavior, Xiaohua asked in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Kai, this fellow Taoist Yan, what is he doing?" It seems to be similar to a warning talisman? Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. This is a special formation talisman. Its function is extremely different from a warning talisman. The warning talisman only serves as a warning, but this formation talisman is used to set up a formation. Looking at fellow Taoist Yan's appearance, it seems that he has set up formation talismans all around the cave. The cave is enveloped by his formation talismans, and no external objects can enter. Strange, why didn't he take it out a few days ago? Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. Wuxia slightly shook her head. I don't know. Maybe it's because we're about to reach the Sobbing Mountain range. Xiaohua disagreed, but he also couldn't think of any other reason. Thus, he returned to the nearby cave. Xiaohua was very simple. He directly used several large rocks to block the entrance of the cave. Xiaohua practiced a series of basic cultivation techniques and spells. He also practiced that indescribable incantation for a while. Xiaohua had been practicing this indescribable incantation for more than half a year. He himself couldn't tell what specific effects it had. He only felt that his ears and eyes were somewhat clear, and his spirit was extremely good. If it was another cultivator, wouldn't they have already given up? Xiaohua didn't have too many cultivation techniques to practice. Since he felt that it was useful, he persevered and practiced it. Just as Xiaohua was reciting the incantation, he suddenly entered a very strange state. It was as if his eyes and ears could leave his body. He could perceive everything inside and outside the cave. Of course, this kind of perception was vague and couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Divine sense? Xiaohua's heart stirred. His first reaction was that he had divine sense. However, he immediately shook his head inwardly. That divine sense should be able to see things outside the cave. I can only sense things, but I can't clearly see them. It's still far from the legendary divine sense. At this moment, there was an extremely slight movement outside the cave. Xiaohua immediately sensed it. Thus, Xiaohua stood up and walked to the cave entrance. He looked outside through a crack in the mountain rock. It was already night. The moon didn't show its head. The entire outside was pitch black. But in the pitch-black distance, he could faintly see a figure slowly flying away. Isn't this Yan Shenwei? Why is he going out? Xiaohua thought and wanted to push the mountain rock away. But when his palm touched the mountain rock, he changed his mind. He brushed his hand and took out an Earth Escape talisman from the space. He slapped it on his body and urged his magic power. A familiar feeling appeared again. His body sank into the ground. Following the direction of Yan Shenwei's vital energy, Xiaohua hid on the ground and slowly searched. Yan Shenwei quietly flew in the air until he was about 1 mile away. Then he stopped. He looked left and right and didn't find anything unusual. He walked to a big tree and stretched out his hand. After drawing a strange mark on the big tree, he took out a yellow talisman. He opened his mouth and said a few words on the yellow talisman. Then, he placed the yellow talisman in a small hole in the tree. Then he looked left and right again and quietly flew back. After he disappeared for the time it took to eat a meal, Xiaohua's figure slowly rose from the ground. Xiaohua looked at the direction Yan Shenwei disappeared and then looked at the place where Yan Shenwei was standing. He smiled bitterly in his heart. This guy, what is he trying to do? No matter if it's the mother-child spirit fruit or the embryonic breathing pill, he has 70% of them. Is there a need for him to do anything? The night was extremely dark, and Xiaohua was underground, so he didn't see what Yan Gonwei was doing. Xiaohua looked around the big tree, and then wandered around for a while, but didn't find any clues. He couldn't help but wonder, this guy, what is he doing here? Maybe, if I wait here I can find something? Xiaohua thought. He hid his body well and waited to see who would come here. However, after waiting for almost a night, he didn't see anyone coming. Xiaohua looked at the bright sky in the east and then went back into the cave. Although he didn't find anything, how could Yan Shenwei suddenly come out from the cave in the middle of the night for no reason? If something is unusual, it must be a demon. When the three of them moved, Xiaohua wanted to find a chance to explain to Wuxia. However, Yan Shenwei and Wuxia were flying in front of him. Xiaohua didn't have a chance to explain. In the next few days, Yan Shenwei didn't go out at night. Instead, he was very quiet. Yan Shenwei didn't have any unusual behavior. Xiaohua didn't want to tell Wuxia anymore. He couldn't figure out what was Yan Shenwei's purpose. Or maybe, this guy just got up to relieve himself? However, just when Xiaohua was hesitating, something happened again. Similarly, Wuxia also changed her direction. Yan Shenwei's face was like frost. Only this time, Yan Shenwei didn't say anything. He just looked coldly and was extremely silent. Wuxia originally wanted to explain, but looking at Yan Shenwei's expression, she didn't want to explain. However, at night, Xiaohua stared at the cave where Yan Shenwei was resting for a long time and didn't see him come out. Chapter 1401. Ha! Maybe I've really wronged him. As Xiaohua thought about this, he sat down cross-legged and calmly cultivated the nameless chant. However, when he entered a meditative state, all the movements in his surroundings were reflected in his mind. He suddenly discovered that there seemed to be some fluctuations of spiritual energy about 10 feet in front of his cave. Those fluctuations gradually moved further and further away. Ah? This guy. Xiaohua opened his eyes. He also realized that he had an Earth Escape talisman. Yan Yenwei naturally had one too. He was definitely escaping far away. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then came out of the cave. He walked in front of Wuxia's cave and called out softly, "Fellow Taoist Kai." After a moment, he heard Wuxia reply from inside, "Fellow Taoist Xiao? Do you need something?" Looking at Wuxia's appearance, her expression was somewhat gloomy and her eyes were slightly red. She didn't look like she was cultivating at all. Xiaohua was stunned, but then he acted as if he hadn't seen anything. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Kai, fellow Taoist Yan, isn't in the cave." If he isn't, then he isn't. What does that have to do with anything? Wuxia thought Xiaohua would say something important, but when she heard this, her face became slightly unhappy. It's like this. Fellow Taoist Kai. Last time when you changed directions, fellow Taoist Yan went out and happened to be seen by I. However, I followed him and didn't see anything. So I didn't tell fellow Taoist. Now that fellow Taoist just changed directions, fellow Taoist Yan actually went out again. I feel that there's definitely something fishy going on. Is that so? Hearing Xiaohua say that he saw Yan Yenwei go out twice in a row, and both times happened after she changed directions, Wuxia couldn't help but become vigilant. But then she said doubtfully, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I was also cultivating in the cave. How could I not notice? Moreover, fellow Taoist Yan is inside the talisman. If he went out..." Wuxia didn't suspect Xiaohua, but she didn't understand how he knew. Xiaohua said with a smile, "The first time was when I casually looked outside the cave during a break in cultivation and discovered fellow Taoist Yan's whereabouts. Just now, of course, I paid special attention." Then he pointed at the cave and said, "If fellow Taoist Kai doesn't believe me, why don't you go over and shout?" And Wuxia trusted Xiaohua very much. She walked to the front of the cave where Yan Liwei was and called out a few times, but there wasn't any sound from inside the cave. "Ah, thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao." Wuxia sighed and shook her head slightly. "I don't understand. He has already taken 70% of the mother-child spirit fruit. What else does he want? I don't understand this either, but he definitely had a premeditated plan. Fellow Taoist Kai, it's better for you to make plans early." Xiaohua saw that his goal had been achieved, so he cupped his hands in salute and turned around to leave. "By the way, fellow Taoist Xiao, I remember that the first time I changed directions, there was no moon on that night, right? It was such a dark night, but fellow Taoist was actually able to see clearly?" Wuxia suddenly asked. This. Xiaohua stared blankly. Soon after he said, "It's normal for cultivators to be able to see with their eyes, right?" Hee, Yan Wei is a 7th-layer qi refining cultivator. How can he walk like a normal person? Wuxia pursed her lips and laughed. Besides, the full moon is overhead today. He shouldn't fly out of the cave, right? Just as Xiaohua was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed, and he flew back into his cave. Upon seeing this, Wuxia knew that Yan Wei had returned. She didn't ask any more questions and hurriedly flew back into the cave. After returning to the cave, Wuxia didn't do anything. She only focused her attention on the outside of the cave, wanting to see Yan Wei's movements. But after listening for the time it took to eat a meal, the outside was quiet, without the slightest sound. Ah, this Xiaohua. Is Shang Huaming's disciple who hasn't entered the sect yet? In the end, Wuxia sighed and rubbed her eyes that had long since become dry from crying. She forced herself to calm down and cultivate. At daybreak the next day, Wuxia saw Yan Wei and smiled as usual. "Fellow Taoist Yan, did you rest well last night?" Because he was used to asking about it every day, Yan Wei didn't have the slightest doubt. He shook his head and said, "Last night, I worked hard in the cave for an entire night. My cultivation didn't advance an inch. To be honest, if it wasn't for this, I might not have been able to come to fellow Taoist Kai's matter regarding the mother-child spirit fruit. And that's good. I also encountered the same bottleneck as fellow Taoist. I hope that this time, the search for the spirit fruit will go smoothly." Wuxia nodded. In the next few days, Wuxia didn't change her direction, and Yan Wei also didn't have any abnormal behavior. Xiaohua also paid more attention to the nameless mnemonic chant while cultivating. On this day, he saw a vast expanse of green in his field of vision. That green was like a green cloud, accumulating in the distance, making people feel a kind of earth-shattering freshness from the bottom of their hearts. Sobbing Meng Mountains? Yan Wei saw and couldn't help but be stunned. He turned his head and asked, "Is the mother-child spirit fruit here?" Wuxia smiled and said, "It is here." "It can't be. My family's senior came to Sobbing Meng Mountains many times before and never saw the mother-child spirit fruit. Moreover, Xuanyan School also has disciples who are training here, and I've never heard them mention it." Yan Wei didn't believe it too much. "If anyone can know about it, then wouldn't this information be worthless?" Wuxia said mysteriously. "And then please lead the way, fellow Taoist Kai." Xiaohua saw that Wuxia still led Yan Wei to Sobbing Meng Mountains and wasn't surprised. He didn't believe that Wuxia, knowing that there was a problem with Yan Wei, would still give him the mother-child spirit fruit. As expected, the three of them flew for more than half a day. When night fell, they arrived at a hidden mountain stream. The mountain stream gurgled and flowed out from a crack in the mountain wall. The surroundings of the stream were lush and verdant. Countless thriving weeds, brambles, and shrubs grew. In addition, there were also many vines growing out from the mountain wall. They flew through the air and hung on the thick trees in the surroundings. This place. Yan Wei saw that Wuxia found a hidden place and was originally somewhat happy. But looking at the surrounding situation, this wasn't a place where the spirit fruit grew? "Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment," Wuxia said to Yan Wei with a smile. She turned and walked in front of a stone wall. Just as Wuxia turned around, she inadvertently glanced at Xiaohua from the corner of her eyes. Xiaohua also blinked his eyes, indicating that he understood. He also inadvertently crossed his hands behind his head with a relaxed appearance. Wuxia faced the stone wall and held her breath for a moment. She formed a seal in her hand and urged her magic power to hit the stone wall. In the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Wuxia didn't know how many seals she had hit on the stone wall, but that stone wall didn't have any reaction at all. Seeing Wuxia's performance so hard, Xiaohua laughed until his belly split open. But Yan Wei, who was at the side, frowned tightly. When Wuxia's forehead was covered in sweat and she retreated, Yan Wei quickly stepped forward and asked, "Fellow Taoist Kai, what's going on?" Cough cough. "Fellow Taoist Yan. I also don't know what's going on. It's obviously here, but that seal, it doesn't work." Wuxia panted slightly and smiled apologetically. "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. The place is right, and the seal is also right. I can't open it for no reason. Wait for I to rest for a while, then I'll try again. Yan Yanwei's face changed slightly, but he endured it and nodded. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Kai. Wuxia rested for a moment, then stepped forward again and hit the blank stone wall with a series of seals. But the result was naturally to no avail. When Wuxia turned around dejectedly, Yan Yanwei's face was gloomy and uncertain. Fellow Taoist Yan, I am really sorry. I really didn't expect that the information was actually fake. I've made fellow Taoist Yan come here in vain. Yan Yanwei stared into Wuxia's eyes, and Wuxia still didn't fear him. After a long while, Yan Yanwei sneered and said, since it's like this, can fellow Taoist Kai show me the jade slip or book that recorded this information? Perhaps we can find the real place by brainstorming together. I can't agree to fellow Taoist Yan's request. Wuxia's face changed slightly, and she smiled apologetically. I've already looked at this thing no less than 10 times. The place and the seal are absolutely correct. Fellow Taoist Yan, please believe in I. I believe in you, but I don't believe in this place. Yan Yanwei suddenly became angry. He slapped his hand and took out a fireball talisman. Wuxia and Xiao Hua were greatly alarmed. They both retreated half a step, but their hands weren't slow either. They wanted to take out a yellow talisman. But Yan Yanwei's fireball didn't fly towards them, but directly hit the stone wall. With a loud boom, a large hole the size of a bowl was actually blasted into the blank stone wall. But that was merely a large hole created by the explosion. There was nothing else strange about the stone wall. It really is the magic power of a 7th-layer qi refining cultivator. This mid-grade fireball talisman was actually used by him to such an extent. Xiao Hua thought, somewhat flabbergasted. How is it, fellow Taoist Kai? The place you chose is still wrong. Why don't you take it out and let I examine it together with you? Yan Yanwei said coldly. How could Wuxia be willing? She resolutely shook her head. Fellow Taoist Yan, perhaps I have comprehended it incorrectly. However, I still hope that fellow Taoist can give me a few more days. Once I find the correct place, I will immediately inform fellow Taoist. Yan Yanwei faced the sky and laughed, saying, you stinky girl, your face looks like a village girl. No matter how you look at it, you don't look like a female cultivator at all. You make I lose my appetite. Wuxia's complexion greatly changed. Just as she was about to speak, Xiao Hua rushed to Wuxia's side, pulled her sleeve and said in a low voice, let's go, there's a 5th-layer qi refining cultivator flying towards us from behind. Right now, Wuxia didn't have the time to investigate how Xiao Hua sensed a cultivator flying towards them from behind. She herself didn't know anything. She hurriedly urged her magic power, and her figure flew up, wanting to escape into the sky. Yan Yanwei had already noticed. Seeing Xiao Hua fly up, he shook his hand, and a fire net talisman appeared, covering the two of them from top to bottom. Right at this moment, 2 rough and obscene voices simultaneously sounded. Fellow Taoist Yan, were those 2 adulterous men and women executed? He looked left and right, but other than a few unlicensed taxi drivers, there was no one else. Third Tanhua very decisively dialed 999, but before 999 arrived, the woman started to wobble again. Third Tanhua advised her to sit on the ground and rest while waiting for the ambulance, but the woman's face was blank. Moreover, she continued to walk crookedly towards the entrance of the district. Most importantly, one of the woman's handbags was thrown on the ground. She simply didn't know about it. Third Tanhua wanted the unlicensed taxi driver next to him to help look after the handbag, but the driver waved his hand and didn't say a word. Third Tanhua was helpless. He could only carry the handbag and chase after the woman. Fortunately, just as the woman left the district, she sat on the ground again, and the ambulance arrived. Third Tanhua hurriedly placed the handbag next to the woman, and told the ambulance what happened. He even asked the district security guard next to him to call 110, and he left. Third Tanhua's heart still had lingering fear. He didn't know if the woman's handbag had a problem, and if she would blame it on him. Chapter 1402. The Blue Twin Bears? This obscene voice was extremely familiar. Xiaohua recognized it immediately. Not to mention Wuxia. Wuxia's face was already slightly pale, as if she was very afraid of the blue twin bears. Quickly leave. Xiaohua was also greatly alarmed. He only thought that Yan Gongwei had a backup plan, but he didn't expect it to be an old enemy. That day, he tricked the two of them, causing them to flee with their faces covered in dirt. When they realized what had happened, didn't they still want to grind his bones and scatter his ashes? Now that he saw it, how could he not know that the two of them had already colluded with Yan Gongwei? They wanted to take Wuxia's life, and he was a pitiful fish in the pond. However, Xiaohua knew that the blue twin bears hated him even more than Wuxia. Yan Gongwei's fire net talisman was indeed fast. With a shake of his hand, it covered the top of Xiaohua and Wuxia's heads, and in the blink of an eye, it fell a foot above their heads. But the scene before his eyes was absolutely out of Yan Liwei's expectations. Xiaohua was like an arrow that left the bow, his figure flashing rapidly. His hand pulled Wuxia's sleeve, and in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, he actually narrowly avoided the fire net talisman. Don't think of leaving. Yan Gongwei saw this and was more surprised than angry. Although he had heard the blue twin bears say that Xiaohua's flying speed was fast, in his eyes, Xiaohua was only a little thing in the first layer of the qi refining realm. Although he was now at the third layer of the qi refining realm, he was only a toy in his hands. It was impossible for him to be his opponent. He only needed to let go of his strength and not let him get close to him, and he could easily deal with him. Who would have thought that Xiaohua would actually escape from his plot? How could he not have the intention to kill him? Yan Gongwei shouted loudly, the magic power in his body surging, fiercely urging the flying talisman, quickly chasing after Xiaohua. At the same time, he waved his hand, took out the ice thorn talisman from his storage bag, and stabbed it towards Wuxia's back. The blue twin bears also didn't hesitate, similarly waving their hands, and several yellow talismans shot out. Their target was Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't care about them, his figure flew, his speed comparable to the peak of the qi refining realm. In the blink of an eye, he flew a distance of 10 feet. However, at this moment, something embarrassing happened. With a tearing sound, Wuxia's sleeve was actually torn off from her Taoist robe by Xiaohua's great strength. Ah! Beneath Wuxia's great shame, she was even more alarmed. Just now, she had already aroused all of her body's magic force and used it all on the flight talisman. That speed was something she had never achieved in her entire life, but even so, she was still far inferior to Xiaohua. Unexpectedly, Xiaohua's speed had ripped off her sleeve. Wuxia's complexion was slightly dark, but the skin on her arms and forearms was sparkling and translucent like jade. For a moment, they were all exposed. Sorry. In this moment of delay, Yan Liwei's icicle talisman and the twin blue bear's fireball talismans all hit within a foot of Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't have time to think carefully and grabbed Wuxia's wrist. A huge force was transmitted, and Wuxia's figure immediately floated up like a cloud behind Xiaohua, flying far away. You think you can leave? Behind them, Yan Liwei saw that the icicle talisman had missed, and he also mobilized his true qi and aroused his flight talisman to chase after them. Although Xiaohua's flying speed was extremely fast, he didn't know what was going on, but although Wuxia was also using all of her magic force and using her fastest speed to chase after him, there was a resistance blocking Xiaohua's arm, restricting his flying speed. As a result, Xiaohua's flying speed was only around the 9th level of qi refinement, unable to increase. Ha ha ha, Yan Liwei sneered. Under the urging of the flight talisman, his speed was already comparable to the 9th level of qi refinement. The distance that Xiaohua had suddenly pulled apart a moment ago was unceasingly shrinking. Looking at the twin blue bears again, although their cultivation was at the 6th level of qi refinement, at this moment, they were still insufficient. They spared no effort to fly behind the three people, and the distance between them grew larger and larger. What's going on? Xiaohua stared blankly, and then became very anxious. He had killed a 6th level qi refinement cultivator before, but he had never fought a 7th level qi refinement cultivator before. Although he saw that Yan Liwei's magic force was formidable, he had some confidence in protecting himself, but with Wuxia, he was definitely not a match. No wonder. There's a flight duel talisman. At this moment, Xiao Hua was very regretful that he didn't buy a flight duel talisman. Little thief, hand over your life. Yan Liwei chased a bit closer, and a yellow talisman shot out. A flying sword condensed, and directly stabbed towards Xiao Hua's back. Fellow Taoist Xiao, let go of I. Wuxia was very anxious, and exerted all of her strength to pull her arm back. Just as Wuxia struggled free of her arm, Xiao Hua's mind lit up, and he shouted, Fellow Taoist Kai, withdraw your magic force. Don't use your true qi in the slightest. Wuxia didn't understand, but at this moment, she obeyed Xiao Hua, and immediately dispersed her magic force, no longer urging the flight talisman. A miracle appeared. Just as Wuxia's magic force dispersed, the force blocking Xiao Hua's arm suddenly disappeared. How heavy was Wuxia? In Xiao Hua's hand, she was about the same as a kitten. With just a slight pull of his hand, she was pulled to his side, and Xiao Hua's figure suddenly accelerated, like a shooting star. Not only did he dodge Yan Liwei's flying sword, he even flew far away, disappearing into the clouds in the blink of an eye. Ah! Yan Liwei saw that the situation was hopeless, and he also made a prompt decision, stopping his figure. His face was filled with inconceivable shock, and he looked at Xiao Hua's flying little black from afar, not knowing what he was thinking. Soon, the twin bears Pai Lan also caught up. Looking at the void in midair, the two of them looked at each other and whispered, Fellow Taoist Yan, this guy's flying speed has become a lot faster compared to that day when we met. What's the origin of this guy? Yan Liwei waved his hand, stopping the two of them from continuing to speak. We've asked around, but no one knows this guy's name. If it weren't for fellow Taoist Yan's message, the two of us wouldn't have known that this guy is called Xiao Hua. The twin bears Pai Lan shook their heads. I heard Wuxia say that this Xiao Hua is a loose cultivator, but his cultivation is only at the 3rd layer of qi refining, but his flying speed is comparable to the 10th layer of qi refining. How could he be a loose cultivator? That's right, fellow Taoist Yan, when the two of us met last year, Xiao Hua was only at the 1st layer of qi refining. In a year, advancing from the 1st layer of qi refining to the 3rd layer of qi refining isn't rare, so it doesn't count as anything. If he's a loose cultivator, then there's a problem. Yan Liwei pinched his chin and sneered. After returning from the sobbing Meng Mountains, put in more effort. Since you know this guy's name, you must drag him out. You must know, if he can escape from our hands today, he can kill us tomorrow. If we don't take advantage of his shallow cultivation to strike first and gain the upper hand, I'm afraid there won't be a good ending in the future. Yes, I understand. Pai Lan and the twin bears bowed and saluted. Soon after they said embarrassedly, the two of us aren't talented, so we don't know how we exposed ourselves, causing fellow Taoist Yan to be unable to do as you wish. Hee. It has nothing to do with you. The two of them were extremely cautious and changed directions twice. I'm afraid that when I went out to send a message, I gave myself away. Yan Liwei smiled and waved his hand. However, even so, they still left behind a flaw. Ha! Fellow Taoist Yan, please speak. Pai Lan and the twin bears were stunned and asked. The sobbing Meng Mountains are extremely vast, so how could they find an extremely hidden place in such a hurry? In order to not arouse Ai's suspicion, Wuxia presumably followed her previous plan and led Ai to the real place, then pretended that she couldn't find the place and coaxed Ai to leave. Only in the real place would I feel normal. So, as long as we carefully search the place just now, we'll definitely find some clues. Pai Lan and the twin bears felt that it was inconceivable, but after thinking about it carefully, it really was very possible. Even if it's not, what's the harm in us looking around again? Yan Liwei smiled and returned to the stone wall first. Sure enough, at the foot of a mountain in the distance, Wuxia had already changed into a Taoist robe. The blush on her face hadn't faded, and she said in a low voice, I also had no choice. If it wasn't the real place, how could we deceive Yan Liwei? I only hoped that he wanted to take the mother-child spirit fruit for himself and let us go when he didn't find a single one. Who would have thought? Hee, no matter. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Isn't it better for us to keep our lives than anything else? But the Kai family of Luyang is far inferior to the Yan family. I'm afraid that this offense will put my Kai family in a difficult situation. Xianxia smiled bitterly. Humph, if we're afraid of this, how can we still cultivate? Xiaohua sneered and muttered in his heart. Why don't you take out the name of Li Zongbao and the name of the utmost happiness faction? I'm sure even the Xuanyan school wouldn't dare to say this. Why should we be afraid of the small Yen family? Also, the place where the mother-child spirit fruit grows, the restrictive spell doesn't seem to be very powerful. Although the place is hidden. If they can guess. I'm afraid the mother-child spirit fruit won't be safe. Wuxia said again. You. Xiaohua was a little angry. Since he knew that Yen Liwei had bad intentions, why did he still go to the place where the mother-child spirit fruit grows? He could have just found another place. However, when he thought about Wuxia's misgivings about not wanting to provoke the Yen family, Xiaohua felt a sense of powerlessness. Suddenly, Xiaohua's eyes lit up, and a fierce look flashed across his eyes. Although the fierce look disappeared in a flash, it was seen clearly by Wuxia. A chill rose from the bottom of Wuxia's heart. Fellow Kai, please wait for a moment. I'll go back and take a look. If they leave, I'll come back to greet you. Xiaohua said with a smile. Yes. I'll listen to fellow Zhao's arrangements. Wuxia's heart trembled. She didn't dare to ask Xiaohua's true meaning and hurriedly agreed. Then she said in a low voice, Fellow Xiao, be careful, Don't worry, fellow Kai, I'll only watch from afar. When they leave, I'll turn back. Xiaohua cupped his hands and flew towards the stone wall again. Looking at Xiaohua's figure gradually flying away, Wuxia stared for a long time. She really didn't expect that a cultivator at the first level of qi refining would have such a great change in his cultivation in a mere year's time. A cultivator at the third level of qi refining actually dared to go back and face a cultivator at the 7th level of qi refining and 2 cultivators at the 5th level of qi refining. Chapter 1403. Yen Liwei and the Pylon twin bears flew to the stone wall. They first looked around for a long time. Then their gazes fell on the stone stream that flowed out of the stream. They saw that the stone stream was very thin. The stream flowed from top to bottom, filling the gaps between the stones, and gurgling unceasingly. Here! Yen Liwei laughed heartily. The water in this stone stream is too deliberate. Presumably, some cultivator used magic power to move the stones here to block the passage. Of course, no wonder there weren't any spiritual power fluctuations. The Pylon twin bears echoed. Let I see what's going on. As Yen Liwei spoke, he slapped his hand and took out a palm-sized object from his storage bag. This object was oval in shape, and there was a thumb-sized hole in the middle. Yen Liwei took that object and took out a yellow talisman in his other hand. Under the urging of magic power, the yellow talisman flashed with an orange brilliance. Soon after, Yen Liwei stuck the yellow talisman onto the palm-sized object. The yellow talisman's brilliance sank into the object. Soon after, the hole in the middle of the object flashed with a milky white brilliance, and then it disappeared. Then, Yen Liwei held the object in front of his eyes. A strange thing happened. Through the hole, Yen Liwei could actually clearly see what was behind the stone wall. Oh, this is a big stone. Look, here is the original gap. Someone used magic power to seal it. It looks like a complete stone wall. Yen Liwei squinted one eye, looking as he spoke. At this time, there was suddenly a slight ringing sound. Huh? The Pylon twin bears jumped in fright. Looking up, they saw a small bell tied to Yen Liwei's waist. Ah! There's an enemy? Yen Liwei was also shocked. He absolutely didn't expect Xiaohua to suddenly turn around. Moreover, he was already within 10 feet of him. But where was the enemy? Yen Liwei was vigilant, and hurriedly added several defensive yellow talismans to his body. Which fellow Taoist is here? I am Su Yan's Yen clan disciple. Fellow Taoist, please show yourself. Yen Liwei said loudly. But after a long time, no one appeared, and the small bell on Yen Liwei's waist was still ringing. Underground. Pylon and the twin bears were shocked. They suddenly realized something and looked down. Yen Wei also came to his senses. Holding the yellow talisman in his hand, He raised the object with a hole in front of his eyes and looked down. Through the hole, everything about 3 feet underground was presented before his eyes. Ah! Under Yan Gongwei's careful inspection, he found that about 3 feet below his feet, a ball of yellow light was covering a human figure. Just as Yan Gongwei lowered his head to check, the human figure in the brilliance seemed to have sensed Yan Gongwei's detection. It suddenly stood up and rushed towards another direction on the ground. Earth Escape Talisman? Yan Liwei sneered. You want to run? No way. As he spoke, he raised his hand. Under the urging of magic power, various yellow talismans rained down. As long as the human figure rushed out from the ground, it was bound to be hit by the yellow talismans. Yan Liwei's mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile, as if he could already see the miserable state of this person being hit by the yellow talismans. Who knew? That person seemed to have a divine sense. He was actually able to perceive Yan Liwei's yellow talismans. Just as he rushed out from the ground, he suddenly rushed towards Yan Liwei's feet. That speed was faster than an arrow. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to Yan Liwei's feet, courting death. Yan Liwei was furious. He slapped his hand and was just about to take out the yellow talismans from his storage bag. At this time, the human figure rushed out from the ground. The thin figure was holding a pitch-black spear in his hand. Xiaohua! The 2 pie blue bears weren't far away, so they naturally saw clearly. They scratched their heads, but they didn't expect that Xiaohua would actually dare to come back. Moreover, he was even hiding under their feet. Humph! Yan Liwei shook his hand, and his magic power was about to urge the yellow talismans. It was also at this time that Xiaohua's spear pierced the crook of Yan Liwei's leg. A tremendous force transmitted. Without waiting for Yan Liwei to scream, a burst of brilliance flashed. Yan Liwei's defensive yellow talismans had already been pierced through by Xiaohua's devil spear. Audacious! Yan Liwei was worthy of being a 7th-level qi condensation cultivator. His defensive yellow talismans were broken, and the black qi of the devil spear pierced through. However, his magic power still urged the yellow talismans in his hand. Several icicle talismans followed Yan Liwei's hand and stabbed down. Bang bang bang. Several consecutive sounds rang out. The iron cloak talismans on Xiaohua's body were quickly broken, and the remaining icicles pierced his shoulder with extreme ease. Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He didn't even have time to look at Yan Liwei's injury. His figure didn't even change. Maintaining his previous posture, he retreated at extreme speed. Xiaohua's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he retreated 10 meters away. You! Yan Liwei pointed at Xiaohua in astonishment. His hand didn't stop, and he took out some medicinal pills from his storage pouch and placed them in his mouth. Unfortunately, before the medicinal pills in his mouth could melt, a black qi pervaded his face. Yan Liwei's finger that was pointing at Xiaohua also gradually stiffened. His figure fell to the ground with a bang, and he no longer made a sound. Ah! Upon seeing this, the twin pie blue bears felt as if they were dreaming. This was a 7th-level qi condensation cultivator. His cultivation was far stronger than theirs. Now, he was actually killed by a 3rd-level qi condensation cultivator. Although it was a sneak attack, and there was no lack of trickery involved, Yan Liwei died at Xiaohua's hands after all. Run! This thought emerged in the minds of the twin pie blue bears at the same time. What was laughable was that, as 5th-level qi condensation cultivators, the twin pie blue bears had encountered Xiaohua twice. Both times, they had ended their confrontation with Xiaohua by running away. The first time, the twin pie blue bears had escaped. But what about this time? The twin pie blue bears had long since reached a tacit understanding in their hearts. One of them fled into the Sobbing Meng mountain range, and the other fled out of the Sobbing Meng mountain range. As for the injured Xiaohua, he didn't care about his injuries at this time. He stood up and directly chased after the twin pie blue bears who were fleeing out of the Sobbing Meng mountain range. The hearts of the twin pie blue bears who were fleeing out of the mountain range trembled with fear. They threw out their yellow talismans with all their might, only wanting to prevent Xiaohua from getting close to them. They wanted to prevent Xiaohua from using force to break through their magic. Who would have thought that when Xiaohua saw the yellow talismans flying over, the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. He similarly waved his hand, and several fireball talismans were activated by his transcendence energy. Like hailstones, they pelted down on the twin pie blue bears and sealed off their surroundings. Rumble, 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 rumble. Xiao Hua wasn't stingy with the yellow talismans in his hand, and he threw out several handfuls in succession. Ah! A blood-curdling scream was heard from the explosion of the fireball. Soon after, a charred corpse fell from midair, falling straight to the ground. One of the twin pie blue bears, a 5th-level qi refining cultivator, was actually burned to death by the fireball talismans that Xiao Hua refined himself. Seeing the twin pie blue bears' corpses fall, Xiao Hua still didn't dare to be at ease. He lowered his body and flew past the twin pie blue bears' corpses. The tip of the devil's spear in his hand still pierced the corpses' backs. Only then did he fly far away, chasing after the twin pie blue bears who were flying into the sobbing Meng mountain range. The twin pie blue bears were 5th-level qi refining cultivators, which was the middle level of the qi refining realm. Compared to Xiao Hua, who was a low-level cultivator at the middle level of the 3rd level, their cultivation was much higher. Although Xiao Hua's cultivation progress was very slow, the transcendence energy in his body far surpassed those of the same level. He wasn't much different from the twin pie blue bears who were in the middle level of the qi refining realm. If the twin pie blue bears worked together, they might have had a chance. At the very least, they wouldn't have been defeated like this. However, the twin pie blue bears had long suspected that Xiao Hua was concealing his cultivation level and planted a seed of fear in their hearts. Secondly, when they saw the 7th-level qi refining cultivator, Yan Wei, was actually killed by Xiao Hua, how could they dare to block his attack? The first thought in their minds was run. After Xiao Hua killed one of the twin pie blue bears, he immediately flew high again, chasing after them in the direction of the sobbing Meng mountain range. While Xiao Hua was burning the other one, the other twin pie blue bears was already about to escape into an emerald green thicket. If he fell, this sobbing Meng mountain range was so big and Xiao Hua didn't have a divine sense, he would probably escape. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and urged his transcendence energy. He completely ignored the several wounds on his shoulder that were caused by the icicle talisman and chased after them with extreme speed. However, the distance between Xiao Hua and the twin pie blue bears was still a bit far. He was still a bit slow. Just when he was still several tens of feet away from the twin pie blue bears, the twin pie blue bears turned their heads and saw Xiao Hua chasing after them. They no longer flew forward and plunged into the thicket in the mountain range. When Xiao Hua flew to the same place where they fell, there was only a thick layer of fallen leaves, decaying and damp. Where was the shadow of the twin pie blue bears? Xiao Hua was unwilling to give up. He sat cross-legged and silently circulated the nameless mnemonic chant, wanting to use that inexplicable perception. However, the movements of several tens of feet around him were all reflected in his heart in a hazy manner, but they were all very normal. How could he find any trace of the twin pie blue bears? After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xiao Hua stood up. He secretly sighed and flew up from his original position. He actually didn't care about the twin pie blue bears. Currently, it wasn't difficult for him to kill this kind of trash. What he was worried about was that the twin pie blue bears would send the news of him killing Yan Wei to the Yan clan, or even Xuanyan school. Regardless of whether it was Xuanyan school or the Yan clan, Xiao Hua didn't want to provoke them. Forget it. How could a cultivator be afraid of these grudges? Since I can't kill them, then I'll just let nature take its course. Xiao Hua directly flew out of the Wei Meng mountain range. However, just as he flew out several tens of feet, he suddenly heard a bird's cry behind him. Although this sound wasn't as breathtaking as the bird's cry he heard on the southern plains that day, it still caused his magic power to slightly stagnate and his body to stop for a moment. When Xiao Hua turned his head in shock, he saw a goshawk spreading its wings and flying out from the lush greenery of the Wei Meng mountain range. And in front of the goshawk were precisely the twin pie blue bears. Ha! How did this ruffian provoke the goshawk? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. However, he was also delighted in his heart. He prepared to intercept the twin pie blue bears. Those twin pie blue bears were also strange. They rushed out from the forest and didn't evade when they saw Xiao Hua. Instead, they directly rushed over. Strange, could it be? Xiao Hua secretly cried out in surprise. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Chapter 1404. Seeing that one of the pylon bears didn't escape to other places, but instead chose to fly in his direction, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. However, before he could turn around and fly away, a bloody scene occurred. That goshawk's figure was rather large. Its 2 wings were about 3 meters wide. Although the pylon bears were flying fast, that goshawk was actually much faster than them. With a flap of its wings, it flew to the top of the pylon bears' heads. It was very strange. When the goshawk stretched out its sharp claws that flashed with cold light and grabbed downwards, it didn't grab at the heads that were closest to the goshawk's claws, but instead directly grabbed at the backs of the pylon bears. The pylon bears' faces had long lost color. Feeling the swift and fierce wind on their backs, they immediately changed direction and accelerated their flight. The goshawk's claws missed. It opened its beak and screeched angrily again. Following this screech, the pylon bears' bodies slightly stagnated. In the blink of an eye, that goshawk's 2 sharp claws grabbed at the same time. The defensive yellow talismans on the pylon bears' bodies were like paper. Without even flashing brilliance, they were immediately torn apart. Immediately after, the goshawk's sharp claws deeply pierced into the backs of the pylon bears. With a miserable cry, the pylon bears' bodies were actually torn in half by the goshawk. The internal organs and some flesh of the pylon bears immediately scattered in midair. However, immediately after, they were blown by the strong mountain wind and scattered in all directions. However, something strange happened. Just as the pylon bears were torn apart by the goshawk, an earthy yellow shadow flew out from the backs of the pylon bears and directly landed on a tree on the ground. The goshawk also immediately threw away the remains of the pylon bears in its claws. With a flap of its wings, it chased after that earthy yellow shadow. That shadow was very small, almost invisible from far away. If not for Xiaohua's sharp eyes and ears, he probably wouldn't have seen it. It was also because of this that Xiaohua was scared out of his wits. Because that earthy yellow shadow was very obvious on the emerald green ground. Its speed was also very fast. In the blink of an eye, it had dashed several meters. That direction was precisely where Xiaohua was standing. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to change direction and desperately fled out of the sobbing Meng mountain range. At this time, Xiaohua already couldn't care about concealing himself, couldn't care about elegance, only wanted to escape from the sobbing Meng mountains, only wanted to escape from this incomparably powerful goshawk's sharp claws. Unfortunately, even if Xiaohua's current flying speed is comparable to that of a peak qi refining cultivator, the 2 spirit beasts behind him are also extraordinary. The earthy yellow shadow in the front has the appearance of a small mouse. The most ridiculous thing is that on the back of that small mouse, there is an even smaller mouse cub. That mouse cub's eyes haven't even opened, and its body doesn't have many fine hairs. Only a small tail is entangled with the mouse's tail. Although this mouse was still dragging its baby, its speed was still much faster than Xiaohua's. It was like a flying yellow line rapidly extending across the emerald green canopy. That goshawk is even more powerful. With a few flaps of its wings, it caught up with the mouse. Its sharp claws are everywhere on the mouse's back. The mouse's fleeing speed isn't fast enough, but it dodges extremely fast. Every time it is caught by the sharp claws, it will be dodged, and countless trees under the mouse's body will be torn apart by the goshawk's sharp claws. Xiaohua desperately fled in front, but, in just a few breaths of time, that mouse and goshawk caught up with him. Two ice-cold divine senses swept over Xiaohua's body, causing Xiaohua's heart to die like ashes. Is there a mistake? Both of them have the strength of a foundation establishment cultivator. Xiaohua secretly criticized. You guys fight, there's no need to bring disaster to mortals. Thinking this, Xiaohua clenched his teeth, turned around, and immediately flew in another direction. Moreover, he flew higher and higher. He knew that this goshawk was chasing after the mouse. As long as the mouse doesn't catch up to him, he will have a chance to survive. Things don't go as he wishes. Xiaohua had just flown away when that mouse that had been fleeing on the treetop suddenly flew into the air. Like a perfectly straight yellow line, it shot towards Xiaohua's back. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. With a wave of his hand, a stack of yellow talismans was thrown towards the mouse as if they were free of charge. With a rumbling sound, a dozen or so fireballs exploded behind him. But in the midst of the exploding fireballs, that mouse unexpectedly flew onto Xiaohua's back unscathed. How could Xiao Hua dare to let it get on his back? The tip of the devil's spear in his hand thrust forward. That mouse only slightly turned and dodged the tip of the spear, steadily landing on Xiao Hua's back. By the time the mouse grasped the Taoist robe on Xiao Hua's back, that mouse's expression was dispirited, as if its vitality had been greatly damaged. It wanted to rely on Xiao Hua to throw off the goshawk on its back. Xiao Hua hurriedly grabbed with his backhand, but even though the mouse's eyes were slightly narrowed, its divine sense was still there. No matter how Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, he simply couldn't grab even half a strand of mouse hair. Why am I so unlucky? Without waiting for Xiao Hua to complain in exasperation, a black shadow descended from the sky. A 3-zhang wide wing blocked Xiao Hua's head, and in the fierce sound of the wind, the goshawk's sharp claws grabbed at the mouse on Xiao Hua's back. Xiao Hua's heart was greatly shaken. Needless to say, this mouse would definitely be able to dodge this claw, and the goshawk's claws would most likely land on his body. Therefore, he was no longer able to throw off the mouse. He once again clenched his teeth, and the true qi in his entire body rapidly revolved. Urging his magic power, he quickly flew in another direction with incomparable speed. At this time, there was already no other thought in his mind. He only wanted to fly even faster, to escape the goshawk's sharp claws. However, he had only flown for a few breaths of time before another sharp gust of wind attacked his back from above. That goshawk's sharp claws fell again. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. He fiercely took out the tip of the devil's spear from his space, and with a turn of his hand, he wanted to stab it into the goshawk's claw. With a clang, it seemed like two sharp objects had collided. Some sparks burst out from between the tip of the spear and the goshawk's claw, but there wasn't any damage on the goshawk's claw. Good heavens! Is this still a goshawk's claw? I'm afraid that even metal and stone aren't this sturdy. Xiao Hua's heart trembled again. However, the strength of Xiao Hua's stab was extremely great. Although the goshawk's wind was also strong, it was still struck back a few steps. Its two huge wings fiercely flapped, and it stabilized itself. A resounding eagle cry rang out. That goshawk was infuriated by Xiao Hua's counterattack. Going berserk, its wings flapped, and its two eagle claws rapidly clawed at two places on Xiao Hua's back. Xiao Hua saw that the tip of the devil's spear was able to block the goshawk's sharp claws. His heart was a bit shaken, and at the same time, he lowered his head and flew rapidly. At the same time, he circulated the nameless chant, and all his attention was focused on the movements behind him. Seeing the goshawk's claw coming down, he immediately blocked the tip of the devil's spear behind him just like before. With another clang, Xiao Hua blocked one of the goshawk's claws, but in the instant he blocked it, the other goshawk's claw came from another direction. This claw was like lightning. The iron cloak talisman and weak water talisman on Xiao Hua's body were like paper under this sharp claw. In an instant, it pierced into his Taoist robe. At this crucial moment, the muscles on Xiao Hua's body suddenly trembled. His entire body suddenly hugged into a ball, and Xiao Hua seemed to be on flat ground. With an extremely ingenious movement technique, he actually dodged the goshawk's sharp claws. The pleasant surprise didn't stop there. At the same time that Xiao Hua used his movement technique, his other hand very naturally took out the devil's spear from the space. He slightly unfolded it in the air, and like using an iron rod, he swatted it at the goshawk's sharp claws from an extremely strange angle. The goshawk's sharp claws did its best to dodge, but under Xiao Hua's ingenious angle and excellent timing, it still couldn't dodge and was hit by the devil's spear. The goshawk's sharp claws fiercely retracted. It raised its beak to the sky and cried out several times. Immediately, its 3-meter-long wings fiercely flapped, and a hurricane-like force directly attacked Xiao Hua. That hurricane hadn't yet come close, but a suffocating feeling hit Xiao Hua in the face. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. This wasn't a simple force, but a hurricane formed from spiritual aura. This was the furious attack of a Foundation establishment goshawk. How could a trifling aura-refining cultivator like him withstand it? Not daring to hesitate, Xiao Hua immediately changed direction. Head down, he flew straight to the ground. Moreover, at the same time he flew down, Xiao Hua immediately used an Earth Escape talisman on his body. This was also the flash of inspiration he had just now. Sure enough, the goshawk was caught off guard by Xiao Hua's sudden descent. In an instant, it rushed far away. By the time the goshawk landed again, Xiao Hua had already fallen a lot. The goshawk had been teased time and time again. This time, it was thoroughly angry. With a flap of its giant wings, a black shadow of 10 feet in size swooped down from the sky towards Xiao Hua's back. Its sharp claws actually emitted a cold light under the sunlight. If Xiao Hua was caught by these claws, he would most likely end up with his flesh and blood flying everywhere. Quick, quick, quick! Xiao Hua almost wanted to reach out a hand in his heart, wanting to quickly land on the ground. Unfortunately, the goshawk's sharp claws attacked when he was about 100 feet above the ground. Xiao Hua didn't even think. His entire body flew at an extremely beautiful angle in midair. The devil's spear in his hand was similarly incomparably gorgeous, and in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, it blocked between his back and the goshawk's claws. The strange thing was that this devil's spear wasn't the same as before. In this attack, there wasn't any strength. Instead, at the same time it collided with the goshawk's claws, it used a kind of ingenious method to borrow the enormous force of the goshawk's claws to rapidly push Xiao Hua's own body towards the ground. Xiao Hua only needed a breath to cover the distance of 100 feet. Just as his body landed on the ground, a burst of brilliance flashed on Xiao Hua's body. The Earth Escape Talisman came into effect. Xiao Hua's body suddenly disappeared under the ground. The goshawk saw that it had been teased time and time again. Its prey, an extremely weak thing, had actually disappeared in front of its eyes. It was abnormally furious. Its body flew on the ground, and its divine sense ruthlessly swept over Xiao Hua's body, who was deep underground. Xiao Hua was underground and had already sensed the goshawk's divine sense. Greatly alarmed, he hurriedly fled to other places. Unfortunately, when he fled 100 feet, the goshawk also flew 100 feet. The goshawk's body had always been above Xiao Hua's head. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.